people within communities in our country feel safe, and of course they have the right to exercise their views within the appropriate bounds of the long-standing tradition of protest we have in our country. I can't go beyond, safe and legal protest, but where it comes to what we need to see, it's about reducing the numbers of people crossing, it's about getting the backlog down, it's about processing cases more quickly.
On the protest, do you sympathise to any extent with the people who are protesting outside these hotels?
I can understand the impact this can have on communities, yes I do, and without dwelling on an ongoing legal case connected to Epping, I can understand how what is alleged to have happened has caused enormous concern in the community, so yes I do. And people will always be able to exercise their rights within our democratic traditions of peaceful protest. But we can't allow it to go beyond that into causing fear, alarm, or for it to get to the position of threats or violence. And that's where we have to draw the line, where the police will take action if it goes too far.
On this, you've had Reform this morning defending their use of the word invasion in relation to the people who are crossing the English Channel. You've also the Archbishop of York coming out and saying that he thinks their language and their proposals are knee-jerk and unhelpful. What do you make of the tone, the rhetoric that has been adopted around this conversation at the moment?
I think where the vast majority of the British public are is that they accept that we have a long-standing tradition in this country of accepting and supporting those who are fleeing persecution. But in order to maintain that system, in order to maintain public confidence, we have to demonstrate that we've got control of our borders. We as a government came into office with major problems at the border, including people crossing the channel, cases not being processed, people not being removed who don't have the right to be here. I believe that I don't think you would find most people in our country using that kind of language. What they want is a fair, compassionate and rules-based system that treats people with respect, but actually where we are clear people don't have a right to be here, we act to remove them, and removals are wrong. Because I do believe that if people's case has been determined and they don't have a right to be here, then we will take action.
You said you think most people wouldn't use it. Would you sort of warn your fellow politicians, other people in positions of influence and power, to avoid using phrases like invasion?
I think as politicians, all of us, regardless of political party, have responsibilities in our use of language, in the way we express ourselves and in the actions that we take. But Reform have no interest in actually sorting this problem. They don't want to resolve it, they want to use it as a means by which they draw a wedge between communities where there's scope. They don't force it intentionally. They don't want to sort it. It's in their interests not to sort it. They're not serious about resolving it. It's headlines, it's language, it's written. It's focused on it.
You're saying that their intention is to conditions in the country was already deep in the market.
I think actually we have challenges in our country, but I think in many ways we are a country that demonstrates remarkable tolerance and understanding and have a strong story to tell around community cohesion. Now, a big problem is still there's some major problems that we want to take action on. But what I focus on as a local government is actually taking action so that people see change happen, that those hotels close, people are removed who don't have the right to be here, and that we process cases more quickly.
Just very finally, Bridget, listen, there are lots of rumours swirling around Westminster of a cabinet reshuffle or some sort of government reshuffle, possibly even tomorrow. Can you tell us about that?
I'm afraid any talk of that is well above my pay grade, and these things are always matters for the Prime Minister. These are all matters for the Prime Minister, and I am not afraid to engage in any speculation. But that is, of course, always a matter for the Prime Minister. It's an enormous responsibility and a privilege to be Education Secretary. I think we've achieved a lot in the last year in education, and lots more that I hope to do in the years to come. But these are always questions for the Prime Minister to decide. I'm not someone that likes to speculate on these kinds of matters. I'm really proud of what we've achieved as a government in the last year, notwithstanding all the problems that we're talking about this morning. But it is more than my job is worth than to comment on questions on I don't think you would appreciate me talking about currently the Education Secretary. Becca Info is Goodall here on LBC. Keep the calls coming in on what you just heard from her about, perhaps about the asylum system, but
particularly interested in your thoughts this hour on why so many children are misbehaving and why so many children aren't in school in the first place. Surely there's only so much that government and teachers can do. Is this not on parents to do something as fundamental as make sure your children get an education? 0345 606 0973. Lots more of your calls to come, and we'll hear from the Conservatives about all of those matters and more just after this. Take care.
LBC. With over 50 years' experience, at Fidelity, we believe there's a difference between investing and being invested. Investing is having access to guidance, tools, and expert insights. Being invested means feeling confident about your future. Investing is choosing from a wealth of investment options. Being invested means focusing on your long-term goals. For ISAs, pensions, or advice, be truly invested with Fidelity. Go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
Body pain might not sound like this.
Oh.
Or this.
Oh.
But it might sound like this.
I'm fine.
Hiding your body pain behind a smile? Let us help. With up to 12 hours of uninterrupted muscle and joint pain relief. Voltarol, the joy of movement. Voltarol Joint and Back Pain Relief 2.3% gel contains diclofenac diethylmonium. Always read the label.
At EDF, we don't just encourage you to use less electricity, we actually reward you for it. That's why, when you use less during peak times on weekdays, we give you free electricity on Sundays. How you use it is up to you. EDF. Change is in our power. Households who reduce their weekday peak electricity usage by 50% can earn up to 16 hours of free electricity per week, subject to their usage. All T's and C's, visit edfenergy.com/r-power.
Hey, Harry. Hey, got any tips for the football?
Your best bet is to head over to Bet Victor. They're giving new customers a terrific welcome offer. If you bet a minimum of £10, they'll give you £30 in free bets.
Oh, that's a steal of a deal.
It's a good darn deal that'll make you squeal for real. Neil?
My name's not Neil.
I know, but it rhymes.
Listen to Harry and make your best bet on the football at Bet Victor. 18 plus, opt in and bet on any football marketing at odds of evens or greater. No cash out, 7-day expiry. Terms and conditions apply. Gambleaware.org.
Brands that use radio are 49% more likely to get noticed. Amplify your advertising at radiocentre.org. Assuming you want to get noticed.
Ben Kentish on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10:23 is the time. We'll hear why the Conservatives are demanding an investigation into Angela Rayner in just a moment, and talk about their policy of going even further than reform in deporting asylum seekers from this country, women and children. They say they would include, and even Nigel Farage. At that prospect. Just before we do that, let's talk to Leroy in Ruislip, who's calling Leroy to talk about schools. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. You well?
Yeah, I'm very well. I hope you are too, Leroy. You work in the school, do you?
I deliver our programme in schools. I run a charity. We go into schools using boxing as sort of like a Trojan horse to get through to the young kids.
Oh, so Leroy, we've spoken about this before, I think, a while back.
Possibly, yeah. Lots of things that it's so relevant to that I can't help but phone up and chat them up.
No, I'm glad to have you back on. What is it that, and when you sort of hear these, the staggering figures, some parts of this country, 1 in 4 pupils are regularly missing school, 70% say today, so this is girls, 50% of boys say they've regularly missed school because they're anxious. What's going on?
I think there's a couple of things. This thing particularly is overlooked. I think current affairs are things that are going on with the police, politicians. I think they all add to this sort of lack of stability, which, okay, you might think the kids can keep up with this stuff, but it filters down. You know, that good old saying, like, lead from the top. We're not doing a great job of that, really. There's a country at the moment that all the things that are going on just filter down and lead to kids sort of being in this sort of malaise. There's a lady that before COVID didn't help, obviously. It took like 3 years. I haven't looked back 3 years. But that definitely doesn't help as well when you see politicians lie and not getting into trouble for, you know, they've always liked to be honest, but not getting in trouble for things they've done or got not.
But what's the link between, I don't know, Partygate, Boris Johnson doing what he did, and Liz Truss, or all the rest of it, and kids not being in the classroom here? Because I take your point. A lot of people are very fed up with the political leadership you've got, but that shouldn't stop you making sure your child gets a good education.
From a kid's point of view, it just leads to something like get away with anything. If they can, so I think it leads down to that, and I think it's well. To another point, I think communication and relationships with parents are essential. With the programme that we run, I put myself forward to say, you know, this kid might really be misbehaving or not turning up, and I say, look, do you mind if I speak to the parent? And a lot of the time they say, well, we'll ask the parent, and then they say, yeah. Hello, Mrs. Smith, how you doing? I'm Leroy. I run this full science boxing programme at the school. I've been working with Derek. He's a real good kid, and I just wondered if all of a sudden, boom.
But is that because you're having the time that teachers aren't to actually get to the bottom of what's going on at home?
Perhaps, and I think it's the approach as well. If you're sat behind a desk, excuse me, and it's sort of like, listen, we've all got that thing. We all went to school. We all still have that subconscious thing about teachers and headmasters. I still sweat when I go into headmaster's office now because I used to be naughty at school. We've still got that thing there. So if you're walking into a school, there's that defensive wall that might be up. The teacher, well, your kid's this, your kid's that. Well, no, he's not.
And so it becomes less us and them the way that you're dealing with it, rather than a sort of battle to be had. Really interesting, Leroy. Great to have you on again. In Brentford.
Morning, Ben. How are you?
Morning. I'm very well, Rob. Thanks
for taking the call.
Pleasure.
So I'm not qualified. I'm just a bloke with an opinion, really.
That's all right. That's what I am.
I just think we're mollycoddling kids too much these days, personally. So we're essentially bringing up to be too soft, and everyone's reluctant to use this word resilience. To me,
but Bridget Phillipson did just use it and has done before, and I think she's right to do so. We do have issues, as you say, but what's causing it, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's like the last caller just mentioned, COVID was a big point where it just disrupted the whole, what would you say, the whole, because people work from home and kids were at school at home and they got used to that instead of having to getting up in the morning and having to go out and do it. Instead just, it's too comfortable. Everyone's too comfortable these days for me. Like I say, there's no resilience. Nobody's hard anymore. We're all too soft.
Is that school's problem? Is that parents' problem? Who's sort of responsible, do you reckon?
I think it's a societal problem, really. I mean, it starts with the parents at home, but when... and then it goes, everything, all of it, really. I wouldn't blame anyone particularly, any kind of one particularly, but I think everyone's got time.
Isn't it about letting them take more risks? The kids today are wrapped up in cotton wool. No, you can't possibly leave the house. No, you're feeling a bit ill. No, you must stay in bed for a week. You kind of wrap them up in cotton wool, and then they learn that the world is a much scarier place than actually it is.
Yes, yeah, it goes back to I'm probably showing my age now, but when I was a kid, I used to climb trees and fall out trees.
Get out with my mates all Saturday when I was 50.
Exactly, and I can never remember not having a plaster on my knee when I was growing up as a kid. Kids these days don't have that anymore, And maybe that's because, like you say, the streets are too dangerous these days. And
They're not. Rob, this is the irony. Actually, in terms of crime rate, they've gone down a lot compared to 50 years ago.
No one goes out these days.
It's because crime generally has gone down, but the perception of crime, because we're all on social media and we're all listening to the news and so on, we think the world is far more dangerous than it was a generation ago. Even in the evidence, it's got a lot safer. So crime's gone down, the perception of how crime has gone up. And then we're all mollycoddling our kids saying, no, you can't possibly go out because you might get abducted or something awful will happen to you, when the chances of that actually happening are really minuscule compared to what they were even 20, 30, 40 years ago. Rob, lovely to talk to you this morning. Thank you very, very much indeed. More of the calls to come on this in just a moment. And we'll hear from the Conservatives. They're calling this morning for Angela Rayner to face an ethics investigation over the sale of her family home and purchase of a flat in Hove. They're also saying that they would extract all the remaining oil from the North Sea, gas as well. Is that something that you would want them to do, or is that pretty much at odds completely with our climate change obligations? Get their thoughts on that, get their justification for it, and your thoughts too. 03456060973. Want to hear from you this morning on everything we are discussing. We will hear from the Conservatives and hear lots more of your calls as well. Straight after news headlines, which at 10:30 come from Dan Wilson.
The Education Secretary has told LBC parents have a responsibility to help reduce levels of absenteeism in schools. Bridget Phillipson is urging them to ensure their children attend class when the new term begins this week, as she announces more support to address the problem. The Conservatives say extracting as much oil and gas as possible from the North Sea will help boost growth. The party's leader, Kemi Badenoch, will pledge to remove net zero requirements on fossil fuel companies if they win the next election. A baby has become the first person in the UK this year to die with whooping cough. The UK's Health Security Agency says the child, who is believed to be less than a year old, fell ill sometime between March and June. LBC weather, scattered showers developing across much of the UK today, heaviest in the west, drier at times, particularly in the east, with some brighter spells, a high of 22 degrees.
This is LBC.
With UK Export Finance, I'm fulfilling more export orders from around the world with working capital support.
Export insurance means I'll get paid when exporting to challenging markets.
At UK Export Finance, we believe no viable UK export should fail for lack of finance or insurance. Between 2023 and 2024, we provided £8.8 billion of government-backed trade finance to support UK exports. Learn how we could help you win export contracts, fulfil orders and get paid. Search UK Export Finance today.
At this vet, Mia's the owner, surgeon, rota manager and puppy wrangler. And now she and her team are cybersecurity experts too.
Mia, someone tried accessing our system. Phishing scam. I blocked it.
BT Security Awareness Training turns your team into your first line of defence. Quick to set up from just £1.25 per user per month. Cybersecurity is everyone's business. Thankfully not just Mia's. Search BT Business Cybersecurity. T&Cs apply. Prices exclude VAT at 20%. 12-month minimum term applies.
Tesco finest Sugar Bell tomatoes. The ultimate supporting act. Zigging up salads or elevating fresh liquid meat. Perfect for when you want to be vined and dined. It's why only the finest varieties are hand-picked when perfectly ripe to ensure our Sugar Bell tomatoes are exceptionally sweet. Make your everyday taste better with Tesco Finest. Majority of larger stores.
Now it's even easier to sell for free on eBay. I was thinking, maybe I should sell that juicer we've used a grand total of once. Or the shirt I've been saying I'll wear for the last 2 years, but never have. Or that tiger cushion the dog barks at every time he's in the lounge. Oh, he's at it again. No, Bertie!
With new AI listing features and simple delivery, it's now even easier to sell for free on eBay. Download the app now. eBay. Things people love. T's and C's apply. Excludes vehicles.
This is LBC with Ben Kentish. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
10:33 is the time. Ben Kentish in for Lewis Goodall here on LBC this morning. The Education Secretary, who we spoke to a few minutes ago, launching a new plan today to try to get more pupils back in the classroom after massive problems we've had with persistent absences and try and get them behaving a little bit better when they do. But why do you think so many children aren't at school when they should be? And if they are, they're messing about and getting sent home again. Let's talk to Dee in Liverpool about it. All right, Dee? Morning.
Okay, so I think there's a bit of a historical context to this. In terms of the UK and the children in the UK today, they are the products of their parents and grandparents who grew up in an educational system that was geared towards the UK being a centre of industry, of heavy industry and production through mining, our own dockyards, etc., etc. That's gone now. So they developed an education system that was basically comprehensive schools, technical colleges and grammar schools. I think what we've tried to do is so people have become disenfranchised from education because it doesn't fit what individual kids need. The reason being they were shoehorned into academy status, which is a sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. And so we're not identifying those young people that perhaps could go on to technical colleges. So our electricians, our sparks, our trades, that's pretty much gone now. And they've invented all sorts of qualifications like the GMVQs and modern apprenticeships. They used to be, you know, pretty much on-the-job learning within heavy industry or the industry that...
You've got to do I take your point, Dee, about we need more vocational education. I think we are heading back in that direction, but you still need to have gone to school, at least until you're 16. And if you're not doing... Look, if your child is really struggling with special needs or mental health, I get it. I just wonder if there are too many parents that are just not sending their children to school because it's too much effort at this point, and that is what I have a problem with.
I hear that, and I think the issue is, one, their experience of school, and they're probably their children saying it's not relevant, I don't learn anything. How many young people do we hear continually? And I worked in...
But I don't buy... Look, Dee, I hear you. There's issues with the curriculum. There's all sorts of things that kids are being taught that's a waste of time and stuff they should be being taught but aren't. But if the choice is going to school versus not going to school... every single day of the week, unless there's a really good reason, that it's going to be better for the child to go to school.
Indeed, and that should be focused on. It used to be back in the day that we had things like educational welfare officers, we had out-of-school programmes, we had pupil referral units, which I think are still there in a different guise, but they engaged not only the child but the family in making that the priority. Because what we always do at the end of this conversation is for a child to give them the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Absolutely. And if you're not sending your children to school, then you're making that much harder. But I do take your point. I think that more and more parents are saying this really helpful. This really beneficial. Partly why 1 in 3 parents now say they're considering homeschooling. 1 in 3. That's a failure of the curriculum as well, isn't it? Right. Thank you for calling in this morning. John's a new caller in a lovely named town in the country, Peacehaven in East Sussex. Nice part of the world as well, John. Morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, just really interesting. I've normally listened to Classic FM on Global Player, and I thought, I just tested it obviously.
Good man.
And was really interested to hear what the Education Secretary was saying, and obviously I've seen on the news this morning about this drive for the first week back at school.
Yeah.
And my point is, I work in the special educational needs sector, and I also have family in special educational needs provision. And special educational needs is completely overlooked at this point. So the Education Secretary is saying, children must go to school the first week. In my family's case, and in dozens of SDN family cases, there is no provision. Local authorities are totally failing the children and not offering them the school places that they need in a timely fashion. So, for example, children are now facing next week, they don't know where they're going to school, they don't know what provision they're having. It's not actually available. So the hypocrisy of saying it's so important, and then, we hear the Education Secretary and lots of people at the moment in the sector saying the SDN system is broken.
Yep.
I don't strictly agree with that. I don't think it's the fact that it's broken, it's the fact that actually the system as written is not enforced. It is chronically underfunded, but the fact of the matter is local authorities routinely break legal requirements and legal timelines, and they're not held accountable by the government.
They're not, and it's happening time and time again. Parents are only getting the support that they need for their children, often long, expensive, lengthy, and of course, incredibly taxing and stressful legal battles, John. Great call. Thank you. Stay with us next time. Stay with us here on LBC, and I hope we speak again very, very soon. John is a new caller in Peacehaven. 10:38 is the time. Ben Kentish in for Lewis Goodall here on LBC. We heard from Labour. We'll hear from Reform a little later in the hour. Let's talk all matters Conservatives with Alex Burkhardt, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Great to have you with us on the programme, Mr. Burkhardt. Thanks for coming on. Let's start with this announcement from your party leader, Connie Badenoch, or an announcement that we're told will be made this week. You are going to extract all the remaining oil and gas from the North Sea. What more can you tell us about how you'll do that?
Yeah, so Kebby gave a very important speech earlier in the year saying that net zero by 2050 was unachievable and had to be said in the context of the US and China, the world's two largest economies, not pursuing net zero, and that we were in danger of running down our economy, putting additional costs on businesses and families and public services by not using our own oil and gas. And so what she's going to say in this week coming is that we will use the resources in the North Sea rather than importing oil and gas from foreign countries, and also to help create jobs in places like Aberdeen and to try and drive down energy costs for everyone in the UK, in stark contrast to what's happening under this government, where energy bills are going up and up, despite the promise to before the election that Labour would bring them down by £300.
Your party that brought in the net zero targets.
It was, and that was in a different context. There was a hope. Well, so there was a hope originally that the very big economies of the world, like the US and China and India, would sign up to this as well. But in the absence of them doing that, what's actually happening is that those countries have much lower energy costs and are doing much better, and our country is at risk of being left behind. So the context has changed.
So because Xi Jinping and Donald Trump have turned their back on the importance of tackling climate change, we might as well do the same.
So when you recognise that, I think when we account for less than 1% of global emissions, you'll see that without those big countries changing course, our impact is incredibly negligible. And you're talking about fractions. You're talking about fractions of 1%. Now we're saying that in the long run, of course, we're going to decarbonise power generation.
Too late, won't it? The scientists say it's too late. The scientists say we need to act now. Whilst we're building the next generation of, for example, nuclear power stations,
we're not going to cut our nose off to spite our face. We're not going to say we're not going to use we're not going to use British oil and gas whilst we're going through that process.
Ourselves for the fuels and the economies of tomorrow, rather than relying on the oil and gas of the past.
But obviously, as you know, you can do that at the same time as you're using your own oil and gas, and to import oil and gas from other countries whilst you're doing it just seems to me incredibly wrong-headed. So this is a win-win situation. Firstly, it gives us cheaper energy whilst we're
it's not win-win for the planet, is it?
Whilst we're preparing for a decarbonised future, yes. We get to use our own oil and gas rather than other countries. Sorry, can I finish the sentence? I'm just going to finish the sentence because you've interrupted me 3 times whilst I've been trying to finish the sentence. So we get to use our own oil and gas whilst we're preparing for the energy transition of the future, and that will reduce bills for businesses and for families and for public services. And it will also keep jobs here.
You said it's win-win. It's not win-win for the planet. It's not win-win for the next generation. It's lose-lose, isn't it? Because what you are doing, or what Kemi Badenoch is doing this week, is completely abdicating the UK of virtually all its climate change obligations.
No, not at all. We're not saying that we're not going to aim for a decarbonised future. We're just talking about the speed at which we're going to do it and the sources of energy on which we're going to rely whilst we're heading in that direction. The alternative is to have much higher energy costs, fewer jobs, which will be incredibly damaging to the next generation, on top of the extraordinarily high taxes that this government.
You think this move will be popular with young people?
This government has.
I tell you, it won't.
Well, okay. Well, I think you'll find that there are a lot of right-leaning young people in this country who would absolutely take issue with that, and there are a lot of young people in this country who are worried about jobs and businesses and their futures in that regard.
I think
that you should go and talk to them. I think that you should go and talk
consistently on the top front.
I think you'll find that not all young people are the same. There are lots of different groups of young people.
Of course.
And you're implying that what you're implying in your statement. What you're implying in your statement is that all young people feel the same way.
No,
they absolutely. Yes, you are. You're saying
when you ask young people,
if you ask young people,
yes,
and that what you're saying is that that all young people.
I didn't say every young person.
That was the implication of your statement. That was the implication of your statement. What I'm saying is that there are groups of young people who feel very differently about this and care about the economies in their local area and care about the cost of energy.
Concept of opinion polling.
I'm not. I think you're studying with the language that you've used.
Let me explain it to you then.
I don't need to explain.
Well, I think you do.
I understand exactly what you're implying.
No, you don't.
And what I'm saying to you is that there are groups of young people who care very much about jobs and businesses in their country and want their families to have lower costs of energy, which this policy will provide. I don't need you to explain. I'm here to explain what my party's policy is and what it's going to do.
Let me ask any questions, or are you just going to talk?
Are you going to ask a question, or are you just going to talk about what you just said?
I'm going to ask you a question. Do you accept that climate change, for when young people across the board are polled, consistently comes out as one of the things that they care most about? And if so, what would you say to them, given they will surely be concerned about what you're announcing today?
I'd say to them what I've already said to you, which is that obviously, in the long, all we're talking about is the timescale in which we go to a decarbonised economy. And if we are going to do that in a sensible, moderate way, which doesn't undermine their future in terms of the economy and of jobs, this is the best solution, and that it will generate more jobs in this country and keep bills down. And the alternative is something that will mean that there are fewer jobs and more expensive bills for their families.
Got your point on that. Let me move on to something else that Kemi Baden has said. She's outflanking reform on the issue of deportations. Even Nigel Farage rode back on the idea of deporting women and children who come here on small boats. Kemi Baden asked whether she would deport women and children, says, of course. Is that correct?
If people have come to this country illegally, they shouldn't stay here.
Women and children as well?
If people have come to this country illegally,
yes,
they shouldn't stay here. And you have to start from, you always have to start from principles on these things. That it is illegal to come into this country without permission, without using a designated route, right? When people do that, they should expect the starting point should be that those people
will be
deported.
Just a very clear answer to my question.
I've given you a clear answer to that question.
Well, you didn't say yes or no. Yes, it does include women and children. Would that include sending them to places like Afghanistan, Sudan and others where they face gender-based violence and persecution?
It would very much depend on the arrangements that the future government puts in place with third countries such as Iran.
So you wouldn't send them back to countries like the Taliban?
I think it's very unlikely that we would ever have to deal with the Taliban. I think it's very unlikely that we would have to deal with Iran or Israel. But that doesn't mean that you can't have third country processes.
So you would send them to another country?
Which is what we would send people to another country if they cross the country.
Is that sort of compassion conservatism, deporting women and children?
So the first thing, none of this is comfortable. I'd rather that none of this was happening at all. But the fact of the matter is we have very large numbers of people crossing into the country illegally, and you have to have a deterrent. And what this government has done is remove the deterrent that we left in place at the last general election. And the consequence is we now have far more people crossing into this country illegally than ever before. And you need to bring that deterrent back. And once a good deterrent is in place, as we saw in Australia about 10 years ago. I just reset to my conversation. Once we have a good deterrent in place, far fewer people will make that journey in the first place.
And you're comfortable that people in this country, that the law-abiding British public, tolerant, open, compassionate people that we are, will be happy with the Conservative government deporting thousands upon thousands of women?
Firstly, there aren't thousands upon thousands of people.
There would be over
the vast majority of people crossing the Channel illegally are working age men.
Yes.
And please do not create the impression that there are thousands and thousands of women and children crossing over on dinghies.
Over the course of a parliament, there would be thousands of women and children that you would have to deport.
That you would have to deport. So what I'm saying is when you have a deterrent in place, the number of people crossing drops right down, and so you don't actually have to deport many people at all. The important thing is to show that you have a meaningful deterrent, which is effective, and that changes the way in which the smuggling gangs work and breaks their business model. And so actually you don't need to deport very many people at all.
Okay, understood. And one more issue I wanted to get your thoughts on. You, Ms Burkhardt, calling for an investigation this morning into Angela Rayner, your party is as well, in relation to her housing affairs. What do you think she might have done wrong?
So my understanding is that Angela Rayner may have sought to avoid paying stamp duty on her primary residence, and there's going to be an investigation into that. I think it's best we let the investigation deal with it. But I think what the subtext of this story is that you probably have people within the Labour Party who are starting to brief against each other. We've seen lots of I know that this is politics. What's emerging now, as Keir Starmer's leadership gets into trouble and people start to talk about Angela Rayner as his possible successor, is that people in the Labour Party are starting to brief against Angela Rayner. We know that Angela Rayner is trying to, is considering putting an amendment in one of her bills that would make it impossible for Andy Burnham to come back as a Member of Parliament in the Greater Manchester area. As I say, I suspect that people within the Labour Party are leaking information about Angela Rayner because they don't want her to take over from Keir Starmer.
That you think she might have done?
So I've just said that the implication is that she may have sought to avoid paying stamp duty on her primary residence, and that's what's being investigated.
The implication I've seen is that no rules were broken. Is that your understanding as well, Ms Burkhardt?
If there is an investigation, then there is obviously a suggestion that something may have been done wrong, and that's what's being looked into.
And you think she might have, broken the law potentially around stamp duty?
No, I think that what she may have done is sought to avoid paying tax on her primary residence, in a way that was inconsistent with what she was expected to do as the Secretary of State.
So you're basically suggesting even if she's broken the laws, what is the point of an investigation if she's done nothing technically wrong?
See, whether she's broken the ministerial code is different.
What under the ministerial code might she have done wrong in relation to stamp duty?
So there are a whole series of ethical expectations of ministers within the ministerial code, and an investigation will establish whether in taking herself off the deeds of her primary residence she has broken any of those expectations.
Really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for coming on. Alex Burkhardt, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, must tell you that Angela Rayner's team insist this morning they deny the allegations and say once again that no wrongdoing has taken place. Let me know what you thought of that. Let me know whether you support the Tories in saying effectively drill baby drill when it comes to the North Sea. They're very much going Donald Trump's way on that. Maybe you think that's a good idea. Maybe you're one of the people worried about what it means for the climate and climate change obligations as well. 0345 6060 973. Ben Kentish, this is LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Just another manic Monday.
It's sure to be a manic Monday as it's back to work in the House of Commons for our politicians following a stormy summer.
More than 50,000 migrants have now arrived in the UK on small boats since Labour came to power.
But some seem to have enjoyed a warmer reception.
The only way we will stop the boats is by detaining and deporting absolutely anyone that comes via that route.
So is it time for a reset to rebuff reform?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, and the new LBC app.
You've packed enough suitcases to know quality when you see it. Well, Saga Travel Insurance has been named a Which Best Buy. And now get 20% off when you buy before the 30th of September. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only. Standard and Plus are Which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Because you never know what little pickles will get themselves into. For pet insurance policies as unique as they are, visit petsinnapickle.co.uk.
When we're little, we don't overthink things. We're brave, confident, we laugh and ask questions. And play. So why stop there? Just because we're adults, it shouldn't mean we stop trying new things. For me, starting a career in early years has meant not just a new job, but new skills, new friends. Yes, do something big. Work with small children. Such early years careers to find out more.
If you could try to sell us or get it sold today with We Buy Any Car. You could spend days on end trying to sell to a bunch of time wasters. Or sell in a flash and head to the fun fair with the kids. Proper gutted. Or proper impressed. To get a quote in 30 seconds, enter your reg number now at WeBuyAnyCar.com.
Buying a home on a holiday park was a dream that became a nightmare. High-pressure sales tactics, huge site fee increases, and a loss of value have left many customers feeling misled, angry, and trapped. But the Holiday Park Advice Centre can help. Contact us today and we'll help claim back any money you're owed on your holiday home. Text ASSIST to 78900 to get started.
Hello, Holiday Park Advice Centre.
That's ASSIST to 78900.
This is LBC. Message Ben Kentish on WhatsApp now on 0345 6060 973.
10:54 is the time your calls are coming in on the government's plan to crack down on misbehaviour in schools. Also, on what you just heard from Alex Burkhardt about the Conservatives deciding that they are rolling back on net zero and they want to extract every last drop of oil and gas from the North Sea. Is that something you think is a good idea as well? To Joe in Ayrshire this morning. Morning to you, Joe.
Hi there, hello. I just wanted to point out that what the Shadow Minister is saying is at best previously able to at worst completely misleading. If we do the whole drill baby drill thing, that will make no difference whatsoever to the prices of UK customers because the gas and oil is sold on a companies, so it won't affect UK household prices. The second point to that is that our energy is pegged at gas prices, which are the highest prices. Now, I live in Scotland. I'm surrounded by wind farms. We hardly use any gas at all in Scotland, but because England uses a lot of gas, all our energy prices are pegged at the highest energy source, which is gas. It will have no effect whatsoever on customer prices.
What about jobs, Joe? Because obviously there has been concern in Scotland, you'll be well aware, of job losses if we sort of completely cut back on oil and gas coming from the North Sea. Alex Burkhart was saying this will create thousands more jobs if we actually start extracting more once again.
Well, is that even true? Is that even true? We will always need some gas and oil, always. If anything, what we should be doing is conserving the reserves for what we actually really need them for. Why do we need so much gas and oil now? Why drill, baby, drill when we should be conserving it? Up here, we have plenty of energy from renewables.
What about the point he was making? Well, if America and China aren't bothering and we're 1% of global emissions, then what's the point? We might as well chuck in the tap.
That's an outright lie.
Which
China, well, about the emissions. China has been the world's biggest investor in renewables for years now. I know they've got a lot to do, but they have been the biggest investor in renewables for years. Excuse me, I'm not feeling very well. So that is an absolute nonsense. Now, the second part about it, they keep on saying, "Oh, we've done our bit to reduce our emissions." No, what we actually did was we outsourced our manufacturing to places like China, and then these ministers went, "Oh, we've reduced our emissions." No, everything that you or I or Alex or Kemi buys from on the internet, mostly it will be manufactured in China.
True. Absolutely right. Joe, great to have you with us this morning. Wish you better. Feel better very, very soon indeed. Thank you for calling in. Lisa's in St Albans, coming back to our main story this hour. Children misbehaving if they're in school in the first place. Right.
Hi. Yeah, that's the I think the way that people parent their children now is just lazy, and this is why we've got this generation of children who've got no structure, no set of rules to live to, because their parents are also glued to phones and tablets, and that's just how they parent their children. They're just sat down, told to get on with it, as long as they're quiet and out of the way. They're not really investing in their children, and I think this is the same thing when it comes just to getting them to school. When did school become an option for children? You get up at the time you're told, you get ready, and you go to school. Whether you agree with the curriculum or not, your previous call made really valid points about the curriculum being outdated for the society we live in at the moment. But it's irrelevant. The reason that my child can go to school every single day, it isn't necessarily because I really found the value of learning about Shakespeare or because I thought she'd need chemistry in later life. It's teaching her that every morning you get up with a purpose, you get dressed in a uniform that the school has told you, you don't try and bend the rules on that either, and you go to school and you behave and you do what you're told by the people that are in charge, and you have that. And that is what we're preparing them for.
Lisa, I don't disagree at all. But what about the big, quite incredible number of children who are struggling with special needs or struggling with their mental health? Is that a big reason, do you think, that's so many people missing something?
I think it's a big excuse. I don't think it's a big reason. I think that's a very easy way out for people now.
But it is happening. That is happening. There are an awful lot of children that are struggling in that way.
I would say that the numbers are probably higher than the people who are having a real impact on. But it's an easy way out. It's an easy way, easy for themselves. You can't get out of bed in the morning, you can't go to school because you're too anxious. Well, what do you think is going to be better than actually going out and socialising with people and building a future and building and learning coping mechanisms around other people, or staying in bed and scrolling on Instagram all day?
Interesting.
Get up.
Lisa, I have to leave it there. Really interesting call to finish our conversation on that, though. Thank you very, very much for getting in touch this morning. Coming up inside the news at 11 o'clock, we will talk to a former Foreign Secretary about why he thinks the only way for Britain to get a grip on the number of people crossing the channel is indeed to tail up European human rights laws. And we'll get a bit later as well from Foreign Secretary to get his thoughts on all of this. This is Ben Kinch School here on LBC, just coming up to 11.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, the Education Secretary has told LBC she is deeply troubled by the number of students missing school, as she calls on parents to do more to improve attendance. More support is being announced by the Department for Education, which will see head teachers who have reduced absenteeism and bad behaviour working with hundreds of schools. Bridget Phillipson has told Ben more also needs to be done at home.
Parents do have a responsibility to make sure their children are in school. What I do recognise is that for some parents and for some children that can be more difficult, whether that's around mental health and wellbeing challenges. That's why we're expanding mental health support. For children with special educational needs and disabilities, that's why we'll be setting out more detail later on this year about improving the system of support for children with SEND.
The government says plans by the Conservatives to maximise the extraction of oil and gas in the North Sea will make the climate crisis worse. Kevin Bateman will use a speech on Tuesday to pledge to cut the restrictions faced by fossil fuel companies in order to boost growth. The Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Alex Bernhardt, has told LBC it will bring prices down.
We will use the resources in the North Sea rather than importing oil and gas from foreign countries, and also to help create jobs in places like Aberdeen and to try and drive down energy costs in stark contrast to what's happening under this government, where energy bills are going up and up and up.
Baby has become the first person to die with whooping cough in the UK this year amid concerns about falling vaccination rates. The UK Health Security Agency said the mother had not had the jab. The child, who was reportedly less than a year old, fell ill sometime between March and June. Nigel Farage has been accused of failing to offer meaningful solutions to these small boat crossings in the English Channel. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, says the Reform UK leaders' plans for mass deportations are isolationist and a knee-jerk reaction. And Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim says he does not see their win over Burnley yesterday as a turning point. An injury-time penalty from Bruno Fernandes earns them their first victory of the new Premier League season. Elsewhere, defending champions Liverpool host last season's runners-up Arsenal later. LBC weather, scattered showers developing across much of the UK today, those heaviest in the west. Drier at times with some brighter spells, particularly in the east, a high of 22 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Dan Wilson.
Tesco Finest Sugar Bell Tomatoes, the ultimate supporting act. Zinging up salads or elevating fresh linguine. Perfect for when you want to be vined and dined. It's why only the finest varieties are hand-picked when perfectly ripe to ensure our Sugar Bell tomatoes are exceptionally sweet. Make your everyday taste better with Tesco Finest. Majority of larger stores.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ben Kentish.
11:03 is the time. Ben Kentish here with you on LBC this morning. We've been talking, have we not, about children going back to school this week, or most of them anyway. Too many won't be there, it seems. MPs also heading back to Parliament after their summer break. And right at the very top of the agenda, after a summer of arguments, protests, demonstrations, even legal battles about the issue of hotels housing asylum seekers and how to stop those people coming on small boats in the first place, Keir Starmer's plan to stop the boats, or smash the gangs, as the Prime Minister puts it, it hasn't done much so far. We're looking at potentially record numbers again this year. The Labour government says, give us more time, we are acting, it will change. But there is growing pressure on them to go even further. Growing pressure from their political opponents to look again at the European Convention on Human Rights and other human rights laws that some people say makes it harder to deport people and stop them coming in the first place. And an increasing number of Labour MPs also now saying, look, we might have to do things that we would have thought were unthinkable, like looking at maybe leaving the ECHR if we are to get a grip on this problem. You talk to a lot of Labour MPs, they will say if the choice is reforming that piece of legislation or not stopping the boats come the time of the next election, when it comes to their election chances, there is only one option that they would favour in that regard, and that is doing pretty much whatever it takes to get control of this problem. So that is something that Keir Starmer, I think, is going to have to deal with in the weeks and months ahead. For now, the government is insisting that's not something that is necessary, but more and more people, including this week, 2 former Labour Home Secretaries, Jack Straw, David Blunkett, saying that they disagree, that they think it might be. Is it time to get really tough? Is it time for the government to look again and say, we cannot solve this problem, we cannot turn the tide on the number of people coming in unless we do something as drastic as pausing or even leaving the European Convention on Human Rights? Is that something you would want Keir Starmer to do? 03456060973 is the number for your thoughts on that. So too for the WhatsApps. It's 84850 to text, and you can say, Alexa, send a comment to me here at LBC This Morning as well. Lots of pressure, as I say, from across the political spectrum now for Keir Starmer to look again at this. Let's talk to one former Foreign Defence Secretary who has also made the case that the ECHR is becoming more and more of a problem when it comes to our migration policies. So Malcolm Rifkin joins us. It's great to have you with us, Malcolm. Thank you very much indeed for coming on. Why is the ECHR such a big issue in your view, and what would you like the government to do in relation to it?
Well, my starting point is I am a strong believer in human rights, and I'm a strong believer in some international mechanism for trying to ensure that nasty countries do not get away with mistreating their own citizens. But, we've got to look at the way in which both the last Conservative government and the current Labour government are genuinely trying, doing their best, under existing law and existing rules, to stop this very, very large growth of unregulated migration. And they're failing. They're failing both, not because they don't want to succeed, but because they are hamstrung to a degree. And it's not just the Human Rights Convention, it's also the Refugee Convention. And these are technical things, but what they add up to is that we cannot simply conclude what is the way in which we stop the boat people or the illegal immigrants without reaching our international obligations. Now, sometimes you have to say that maybe to revise these international not even leaving it, it's suspending it, saying that we are in a period of crisis. We need to be able to ensure that the laws that will be necessary to prevent illegal migration, illegal boat people, have to be observed and enforced. And if that means for the time being, that may be a few years, but it needn't be permanently, that we say we will operate according to what our own acts of parliament and our own courts conclude is legally acceptable, that must be a significant improvement. But let me just give you an example. It's not just the ECHR, it's the Refugee Convention. Under the Refugee Convention, the way in which it's interpreted is that any person who comes to this country legally or illegally and claims that they should not be sent back to their own country because they might face persecution, they win their plea for a refugee status and asylum. Now that is absurd. Take Afghanistan, for example. Every single woman in Afghanistan, that's half the population, are denied their legal rights. They're persecuted, forced to do all sorts of things that do not apply to men in this dictatorship called Afghanistan by the Taliban. Now, are we saying that we must accept any Afghan woman who might wish to come to Britain or to France or to Belgium or to Germany?
No, but I guess what we are saying is if they are I guess what some people would say is if they are already here and they are found to have a legitimate claim for being persecuted, if they were
you say legitimate, hold on, let me interrupt you. You say the legitimate case. Now the question is legitimate under which set of rules? Under rules approved by our own parliament, our own courts, or where we are obliged to apply the way in which international...
I hear your point. The point I'm making is if women and girls are here and you or whoever has decided that yes, they don't face direct persecution, but they would go back and live under the Taliban. Do we want to be the sort of country that deports women and girls who have reached our safety and our shores and send them back to live under the Taliban? Is that something
I'm not saying we want to do that.
But should
it depends on. Hold on a moment. You're not just dealing with the people who are here illegally. you're trying to deter huge numbers of other people who have not yet arrived from thinking they'll get away with it. Now, the problem is that we're in a situation where there's something like 50 million to 100 million people around the world who have left the countries of their origin for various reasons. Now, we cannot, and this is not just about Britain, the vast majority of them actually want to come either to Britain or to other European countries, not because they're refugees. They may have some.
But I'm asking...
Let me finish. They're wanting to come to Britain because they're
people who have come from Afghanistan, and you say we don't want to let them get away with it somehow, or if they've done something sort of abhorrent or wrong. We're talking about women, girls, who face, as you well know, appalling persecution under backward medieval regimes like the Taliban, saying, please shelter us, please give us safe haven. Is some of them, maybe most of them, should be sent back.
No, I'm not saying that at all, and it's unfair of you to suggest otherwise.
What should happen?
But what I'm saying is not that no one should be allowed asylum in this country, regardless of the evidence they produce. If there is evidence that they, as individuals, are going to be persecuted because of something they've said or some peaceful way in which they've opposed their government, that is what asylum used to be all about. Now, if in fact we know that very large numbers of them are economic migrants, they're coming for economic reasons to improve their standard of living, I can understand that. I'm not saying they're bad people.
If you mean
I'm saying that
if you mean
you're not allowing me to finish. Please allow me to finish.
Well, they're not going to be raped or forced into marriages at the age of 13 or stoned if they go to university. I mean, yes, that is economic migration, I would say.
Are you seriously suggesting... Now, hold on a minute. Are you seriously suggesting that if several million Afghan women turned up in Britain, they should automatically be allowed
because they can't and they won't,
regardless of the other implications?
Because they can't and they won't. What I am suggesting is...
You're not answering the question. Sorry.
Let me answer the question. If you stop interrupting me respectfully, Sir Malcolm, I'm not saying that for a minute.
Interviewing me.
Because the chances of... You're just asked me a question for some reason. The chances of millions of Afghan women and girls coming here are... You'd agree with that, I'm sure. What I'm putting to you is the ones that are already here and face barbarous treatment under the Taliban possibly shouldn't be sent back to endure that barbarous treatment.
No, what I am saying is that any individual, not because of the country they come from, but because of the way in which they personally have been treated by a government in an unacceptable way, if they are already here, I have considerable... I'm not calling for people to be deported in large numbers. That's not Farage. I'm not... Let me finish my sentence. I am not saying people should be deported. I am saying we must change the rules to ensure that this sort of thing cannot continue indefinitely. Not just in Britain. The same applies throughout the Western world, where millions of people are, if they're given the opportunity. We're talking about people who paid £2,000 to criminals in order to get them to
in some cases, a sign of how desperate they are to get away from where they're coming from.
It's a sign of how wealthy they are to start off with.
You say you're not calling for mass deportations. I believe you're still a Conservative. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, is. In fact, she's going further than Nigel Farage. He said, well, no, women and children, maybe we'd make an exception for them. Kemi Badenoch says, of course, she would absolutely deport women and children. Are you comfortable with that?
Look, I'm not here to defend Kemi Badenoch. I'm not a Conservative member of Parliament. I am a Conservative. No. She's perfectly capable of defending herself.
If you
I'm not being interviewed on Kemi Badenoch's views. I'm being interviewed on my views.
But I'm asking if you agree with the leader of the party that you support. I'm asking if you...
I have not seen the precise text that she's used, and therefore I'm not prepared to comment until I do.
But are you happy with the Conservative policy, which she announced this week, of mass deportations?
I don't recall her calling for mass deportations. She did. I have not seen that referenced by
Tories would deport anybody who comes in.
These are the headlines that newspapers and people like you use.
No, they're the words that she uses. They're the words of the leader of the Conservatives. She was asked, would you deport women and girls? We had the Shadow Minister on a little earlier, and the answer from her was yes, of course.
That is, even what you just said does not constitute mass deportation. You, like a journalist, you use a headline and then you misrepresent deliberately.
That's outrageous. That's an outrageous suggestion.
I know it's outrageous. I thought you'd agree with that.
You just said yourself, Samantha, you haven't seen the quote, so I'm not sure quite what you're telling me, what she said.
You're telling me, do I support mass deportation, which you claim Kemi Badenoch has argued for?
She was asked.
I'm sorry, this is a pointless.
She was asked under a Conservative...
We're talking over each other.
Let me tell you what she said, because you've just told me you haven't seen it. She said, as she was asked, would all illegal migrants be removed under a Conservative government, men, women and children? She said, of course. Now, given that 50,000 people come here a year on small boats, she is talking about deporting 50,000 people a year. Therefore, I put it to you, that is mass deportations. Are you comfortable with her saying?
I'm sorry, you're interpreting it your way, and I'm not, having not seen the text myself, I'm not getting talked into giving answers of a facile kind.
Why is it
to a question that a journalist has invented for the purpose of this interview.
I haven't invented it. I'm asking you what the leader of the opposition said.
I'm sorry, I'm not the leader of the opposition. You put these questions to her.
You can say you haven't seen it, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I think we better end the interview.
That's
This is
absolutely
absurd.
right.
You're being childish, and I'm not going on.
I'm asking you about what the leader of the
You're not
party
being a
you
professional
support
journalist.
has said, and you can't answer it because you haven't seen it, which is absolutely fine, but it's perfectly within my rights to ask you about it.
Yeah, it's perfectly within your rights to ask, and it's perfectly within my rights to say you're asking an unreasonable question for someone who's not seen the original conversation, which you know perfectly well. Grow up and be a serious and professional journalist.
Well, I put it to you once again. I told you what
you can tell me that as often as you like. I think I'm ending it. Good night. Good day. Goodbye.
Good morning to you. Thank you for coming on. Sir Malcolm Rifkin, former Foreign Defence Secretary. Perfectly reasonable to say Kemi Badenoch wants to deport everybody who comes here. Nigel Farage says, well, actually, I wouldn't deport women and girls. Kemi Badenoch says, of course I would. We had Alex Burkhardt, the Shadow Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster, on this morning, saying, yes, we need a deterrent. That would include women and girls. Perfectly reasonable question. What are your thoughts on Sir Malcolm Rifkin refusing to give me his thoughts on it? What do you make of it? Are you happy with a Conservative government, if one was to be formed, deporting women and girls? Kemi Badenoch is outflanking Nigel Farage here. He says, I will deport everybody who comes here on a small boat, and then rode back and said, well, actually, we're not really talking about the women and girls, we're probably let them stay. Kemi Badenoch says, no, send the women and the girls back as well. Get rid of them. Are you happy with that sort of language? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Come to your thoughts on that. I will hear from Reform UK to get their sense of exactly what it is they're promising and why one church leader today says he's not a fan. Tell you more about that in just a moment. It's 11:16.
This is LBC.
Did you know you can get Santander cycles for 24 hours for £3.50? I spent the day feeling the morning breeze, rolling with mates. Keep up! Freewheeling!
For £3.50, you can get 24 hours of unlimited 60-minute rides on Santander Cycles. Download the Santander Cycles app to find your nearest docking station. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Pedal bikes only. Additional charges apply for e-bikes. Other T's and C's apply.
My beans have been to Mexico. They once went to Peru. My beans, they flew to Portugal, then went to Tuvalu. My beans were with me in Italy, then came with me to Greece. I slurped their sauce on Spanish shores. I nibbled them in Nice. My Heinz beans have seen the world. They've travelled far and wide because they are, as we all know, too good to leave behind.
Okay, let me stop you there, sir. You still have to check them into the hold.
Oh, all right then. Honestly.
Beans means Heinz.
This touchscreen is bigger, easy to use, the image sharp and nice. Let's check out the Bowser sound system. The interior is beautiful in this lady aeroboat weave. I like it. And reverse hub, switch off, and plug in.
Sir, after a test drive, we usually return to the moment.
Of course, I was just checking how good it was on my driveway. Sorry.
Save £4,750 with 3.9% APR representative finance on the refreshed Volvo XC60 plug-in hybrid. Visit your local Volvo retailer for a test drive.
Personal contract purchase finance provided by Volvo Car Financial Services UK Limited, subject to availability, terms apply. You've packed enough suitcases to know quality when you see it. Well, Saga Travel Insurance is much supply. And now get 20% off when you buy before the 30th of September. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only Standard & Plus on which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply.
Ben Kentish on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
11:19 is time talking all things migration this hour, the Conservative policy on it, the Reform UK Party policy on it as well. They gave a press conference this week announcing a plan for mass deportations, and unlike Malcolm Rifkin, I think they're happy to use that phrase themselves. Let's get into some of the details of it with Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, who joins me in the studio. Richard Tice, great to have you with us.
Good morning.
Elon Musk, let's just start with the Epping ruling if we could. We'll come on to your plan in just a moment. Elon Musk has called the government decision to fight that court case in relation to the Epping Asylum Hotel. He says the government is committing treason against its own people. I wonder if you'd agree with that assessment.
I wouldn't use that language, no, but the government have got themselves into a terrible pickle on this, because on the one hand they say they want to close the hotels, they've promised that, and on the other hand they're using lawyers and taxpayers' money to say that actually the hotels have got to stay open and the rights of illegal migrants is greater than the rights of British citizens. That's literally what part of their application was. So look, they're in a terrible mess on this. What they should do is adopt our policy, which is to set up detention centres in remote areas away from residential areas and rapidly process people. On every metric, the number of people crossing this year, the channel is up about 50%, the backlog is up, the number of people using that to hotels, I believe, is up. So all these metrics, when the government say they're going to do something, actually the opposite is happening.
And you've spelled out your plan this week. There's a couple of sort of issues that have got a bit of attention and not entirely clear. Let's just see if we can clear them up. The first is the deportation deals that you want to strike with countries where people are coming from. Would that include countries like the Afghanistan and the Taliban leadership there?
Yeah, we'll be negotiating deals with a range of countries. You need a range of options so you're not overexposed to one country like the Tories were with Rwanda. Do you know what? Sometimes you have to do business with people that you may not like, you may not want to go to the pub with.
Even the Taliban?
Well, for example, if we want a ceasefire in Gaza, which everybody does, you have to deal with the terrorists Hamas. If we want a ceasefire in Ukraine, which everybody does, then you have to deal with Putin and his team.
Peace. And so we're talking about deportations. It's a slightly different matter.
You know, it's the principle of dealing with people that you may not like. That happens in business. It happens in running countries. Governing is a difficult process, but ultimately, yes. We send 150 million quid a year to Afghanistan, which effectively means we're sending it to the Taliban.
If you were in business, you wouldn't be striking deals with the Taliban. No, we wouldn't be doing it. If you did massive business, you'd be done on terror.
But if we're lucky enough to be running the country, then yes, we will be looking to do deals with a range of countries. Now, there's no guarantee that you can do a deal with any of these people, and that's why you need to look at a range of countries so that you will do deals with some. And what that does is start to create a proper deterrent so that people stop coming across the channel, because they know they will be immediately detained and they will be rapidly processed, rapidly rejected and rapidly removed from the United Kingdom.
Any qualms at all, morally, ethically, about doing business with
Do you know what the job of the British government is? It's to advance the prospects and prosperity of British citizens. And we should not be held responsible for every weird, wacky, despotic regime around the country. Terrible things happen. It's very sad. We'd all love the world to be a perfect place. It's not. That's the harsh reality.
I'm just saying, would you have any qualms about going, meeting the Taliban, signing a deal, shaking hands, backslaps all round, we've done the deal? Would that not bother you in any way?
If it means that we are advancing the removal of people who've come here illegally, and advancing the protection of British women and girls, then if that's got to be done, it'll be done.
Because you would say, actually, that when it comes to deporting people en masse, like you're talking about, that trumps any sort of ethical objections at all to working with these sorts of regimes?
Yes, it does, because the role of the British government is to look after the British people. No ifs, no buts.
In terms of actually what happens when people are here, you're talking about a new British Bill of Rights. So you pause the Refugee Convention, you pause or pull out of the ECHR.
We'd pause the Refugee Convention, we'd pull out of the ECHR, lock, stock and barrel, and we'll scrap the Human Rights Act. And then there'll be a gap before a British Bill of Rights.
And this British Bill of Rights would only apply to British citizens?
Yes.
So if you've lived here for 30 years but you're not actually a citizen, you have worse rights or fewer rights than some.
Isn't it interesting that before the Human Rights Act of 1998, actually the country was doing quite well. Public services were a lot better than they are now. The economy was growing at 2.5% to 3.5% a year. And there is a strong argument that actually things like the Human Rights Act, things like the Equalities Act of 2010, have actually been partially responsible, not totally, but partially responsible for more lawfare, declining productivity and declining growth.
But just to be clear on the policy, people who have lived here, however long they've lived here, if they're not British citizens, would have fewer rights than people who were British citizens under your plans.
And frankly, that's not an unreasonable proposition. Of course, we'll debate it, we'll look at the specific detail.
You probably more than any politician have warned about two-tier justice in this country in recent months. That is the epitome of two-tier justice. Whether you have rights and which rights you have would depend on whether you were a citizen or not. That's two-tier justice in action.
A British citizen is a British citizen, someone who is a foreign national. By definition, that is a two-tier structure. They're not a British citizen.
Even if they've lived here for 40 years.
And we will look at all the specific detail of how long someone has lived here. But I don't think it's unreasonable to reiterate, and this is why I think one of the reasons we're leading in the polls, we tell it as it is, our job is to focus on advancing the interests of British people, British citizens, and to make people better off and improve the quality of housing and public services. That's what we're focused on.
The Archbishop of York coming out this weekend and describing your plan as isolationist, short-term and knee-jerk. I know you're a proud Christian man, Mr. Tice. Does that bother you, church leaders criticising you in that way?
No, it doesn't, to be honest. I think that the Church of England should focus on their own internal problems. Let's start. Perhaps they should start by finding a new Archbishop of Canterbury who should do a decent job, increase the congregations like other churches are doing, and focus on all the things around Christianity and leave international immigration policies to elected politicians.
They are supposed to be the sort of moral authorities of some of them in this country. They speak out when they think that, that unviable norms and sort of ethical rules are being broken. It sounds to me like that's what he thinks your policy does.
Well, he's veering into areas that historically and traditionally, and I think should be dealt with by elected politicians, which is international immigration policies. So, yeah, he can talk about being kind and thinking carefully and justice and all those good things that I view from the Church of England, and that's the sort of Christianity that I've grown up with. But I don't recall hearing any sermons about international immigration policies in the 60 years I've been going to church.
Just one other element of your policy that sort of caused some concern and confusion, I think. Would women and girls be included amongst the people that you would deport?
The overall principle is that no one who is here illegally can expect to remain here forever. That is an overarching guiding principle, because otherwise you continue the magnet factor. But look, we don't actually know how many people are here illegally. It might be 1 million. So look, the
that
first
includes
phase,
women and girls.
Of course, it includes women and girls, and boys as well. Look, the first phase is about removing men, and then we will see, once we try and understand what actually are the real numbers we're dealing with, what are the specific cases, of course, you can look at, but there has to be an overarching principle, which is that if you are here illegally, you cannot expect to stay here forever. If you think you can come here illegally, you cannot expect to remain here
and
for very long.
And that includes women and girls.
And that ultimately will include women and girls.
Including sending them to places like Afghanistan?
Well, those are all the details that we've got to look at when we know what sort of details we've got. Look, at the end of the day, nothing's off the table.
Okay. And
but it's really important. That's the advantage, to reiterate, of having a range of deals with a range of countries, including potentially, as Nigel said last Tuesday, British overseas territories.
Who would be able to come here and claim asylum under a reform government?
Well, actually, we were doing asylum quite well 20 years ago, when on average we were welcoming about, give or take, 20,000 people. And to its credit, the then Labour government was deporting over 40,000 people every year. I think they were accepting about 18 to 25% of applications. Now that figure is in the 70s.
But of course, the Conservatives closed all the routes you're referring to.
The Conservatives made a complete mess of everything.
Would you reopen?
You've got to start everything again.
So you'd reopen some of the legal routes?
We need to have a working asylum policy. But the first, to be honest, initially, I think one's got to just press the complete pause button whilst we work out what actually on earth has really gone on. How many people really are here? And where are they? What are they up to?
Your party chairman talking about your deportation plan being akin to Trump 2.0, as Housie Yusuf put it. Is the sort of Trump administration a bit of an inspiration for reform when it comes to this?
Well, they do seem to have succeeded with regard to closing their border with Mexico. they're talking about having reduced illegal immigration across that border to the squareage of not a lot. So, yes, I mean, that actually, I think we should learn lessons from that. And we should be prepared to learn lessons from countries all over the world that succeed in different areas. What I fear is that for too long, our establishment class and civil service think that we know best about everything. We don't. The country is in a terrible state. It's also, by the way, going bankrupt. You only got to look at the cost of 30-year borrowing at the moment, which is at a, give or take, 30-year high, to realise the financial markets, the bond markets, are very anxious about the lack of growth, the extraordinary amount of government borrowing, and the inability of this government to control public spending.
Let me just bring you back to migration just finally. Zias have also defended the use of the word invasion to describe what's happening on the southern coast, Mr. Stiles. Is that language you would echo?
Yes, it is an invasion. About 180,000 people.
But that's give or take, coming here to take
it's
control.
Double the size of the British Army. But if we had said 5 years ago, oh, by the way, folks, 180,000 people are just going to rock up on the shores of the south of England without any form of documentation, illegally. I think most people say, hang on, that sounds a bit like an invasion.
But an invasion suggests they're here to take control, doesn't it?
It's... You could read into it what... They are here to take advantage...
Here to claim asylum.
No, they're here to take advantage of our hospitality, our generosity, and I'm afraid the British people have had enough of that because we are heading towards bankruptcy. We cannot afford this. It was working well in sensible numbers, a sensible asylum policy, right, give or take, 20,000 a year, 20 years ago, was working well.
They are invaders. These men and women and children are invaders.
This is effectively, that's what it is. It is, they're all coming here illegally, and some of them, I regret to say, are coming either as part of criminal gangs or they are essentially slaves of criminal gangs because they've borrowed the money to pay for their crossing and then they have to work for these gangs in hideous conditions.
This country's a tinderbox. I'm sure you'd agree with that. Part of it, I completely accept, is the failure to stop the problem we're talking about here. I put it to you as well that language like invasion, it makes things so much worse. It makes this country so much more divided.
Do you know what makes things better? Telling the truth. Even if it's uncomfortable, why we're leading the polls is because we tell it as it is and we come up with solutions that will work to make this country better. And actually, the country voters are furious with both the Tories and Labour,
not disagreeing.
who promised one thing and have done exactly the opposite.
I'm not disputing that for a minute. I'm also saying language matters. And at a time of heightened tensions, we had Bridget Phillipson on earlier, she was saying you, all people in positions of power, have a responsibility to use moderate language to try and dial down the rhetoric rather than ramping it up. Phrases like invasion are the opposite. They intentionally ramp up.
It might upset some people in the establishment class in and around Westminster. Let me tell you, in Boston and Skegness and my constituency, it doesn't upset almost anybody. I'll tell you what it is, it's the truth, and that's how they talk about it, and they appreciate me standing up for their interests, and I think that's what's going on up and down the country.
People. It's about whether you are contributing to a greater sense of national unity that makes this country a better place to live, or deepening the divisions that make this country so divided.
Clearly we are, because look at the polls. We're leading in the last poll by about 15 points, so I think actually we are beginning to bring people together under the reform plans and proposals. And even if there might be quite a few people, for example, who say, well, that wasn't quite where I was a few years ago, but the country's in such a state, we've got to change things because it's gone way too far. And sometimes that's what happens, and that's the joy of democracy. People can say, well, I'm going to lend you my vote for a few years to see if you genuinely can do what you say you can do. The others have tried, they've failed, they've messed it up. And this idea of banning words and language...
It's not banning it, it's about the consequences. No one's saying it should be banned. It's about... all I'm putting to you is the consequences of that language are more harmful than they are beneficial.
I think the British people appreciate some honesty about the emergency situation that this country is in and saying we need to stop it and change it. And if this government adopts our policies...
masked men trying to break into hotels, does this sort of... And I know you condemn them, but does this sort of... But does this sort of language not... Is it not a slippery slope to those sorts of things because you are whipping up anger you are whipping up hatred?
By being a sensible, responsible party that is looking to run this country, we are preventing anything much worse coming. And that's what happens if you try and bury something and not allowed to talk about it, which in a sense for the last decade people haven't been, then bad things can happen underground. Much better to talk about it openly, even when it's difficult and uncomfortable.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Your calls coming in on that. Come to those just after the news headlines here on LBC.
The Education Secretary says parents need to play a bigger role in reducing levels of absenteeism and bad behaviour in schools. The Department for Education says hundreds of thousands of pupils will be given support from head teachers who have a track record of improving attendance. The Conservatives say expanding oil and gas exploration in the North Sea will bring down energy bills and reduce the reliance on foreign imports. They're pledging to maximise extraction of fossil fuels if they're re-elected. A murder investigation is underway after a woman died in a fall from a block of flats in Southampton. Emergency services were called to a building on Thursday afternoon, but the 25-year-old died a day later in hospital. LBC weather, scattered showers developing across much of the UK today, those heaviest in the west, drier at times with some brighter spells, especially in the east, a high of 22 degrees.
This is LBC. Listen on the move with the all-new LBC app. Download it for free from the App Store.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Root Clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Octopus Energy. Great value and outstanding customer service. Recommended by which? 8 years running. Octopus Energy.
This touchscreen is bigger, easy to use, and the image sharper. Nice. Let's check out the Bowers & Wilkins sound system. Whoa! Interior is beautiful with this navy herringbone weave. I like it. And reverse up, switch off, and plug in.
Sir, after a test drive, we usually return to the forecourt.
Of course, I was just checking how good it looks on my driveway. Sorry.
Save £4,750 with 3.9% APR representative finance on the refreshed Volvo XC60 plug-in hybrid. Visit your local Volvo retailer for a test drive.
Personal contract purchase. Finance provided by Volvo Car Financial Services UK Limited. Subject to availability. Terms apply.
Arenas full of fans. Stars taking it to another level. The excitement, the glory, the action. And you could be behind it all. Kickstart your career in esports with Global Academy's new esports production sixth form course. Get the skills and knowledge to join a fast-growing media industry. And you could even join Global Academy's own esports team. Thinking what next after GCSEs? Then find out more about the esports production sixth form course at globalacademy.com.
My beans have been to Mexico. They once went to Peru. My beans, they flew to Portugal, then went to Tuvalu. My beans were with me in Italy, then came with me to Greece. I slurped their sauce on Spanish shores. I nibbled them in Nice. My Heinz beans have seen the world. They've travelled far and wide, because they are, as we all know, too good to leave behind.
Okay, let me stop you there, sir. You still have to check them into the hold.
Oh, all right then. Honestly.
Beans means Heinz.
This is LBC with Ben Kentish. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
11:37 is the time. Your call's coming in, and what we were just talking about with Richard Tice, and before that, previously, I was trying to with Sir Malcolm Rifkind, the Conservatives saying they would deport women and girls who come here on small boats. We heard Richard Tice there saying, look, it wouldn't be our priority, but yes, at some point in time, anybody who comes here in that way would be deported. Is that what you want to see? And what about the tearing up the human rights element? You've now got people in Labour, Reform, and the Tories all now saying, to solve this problem, we need to start doing away with, or freezing, or suspending various bits of human rights laws. I wonder if that's something that you think, yep, get on with it, not a day too soon, or does it just trouble you a little bit if that's where this is heading? Let's talk to Robert in Gateshead this morning. Hi, Robert.
Hello, Ben. Nice to talk to you.
And you, sir. Welcome.
Sir Malcolm Rifkind and Richard Tice have been sitting next to Sebastian Gorka.
Do you know what, Rob? There's this increasing tendency that I've noticed to avoid answering a question, to kind of make out that the question itself is ridiculous or is unthinkable or unfathomable, rather than
Sir Malcolm was actually denigrating you, and a proper journalist.
He can say what he wants, Robert. He supports the Conservatives. He's a former Conservative Foreign Secretary. I asked him what the current leader of the Conservative Party is saying, what he thinks of it, and it's up to him whether he answers it, isn't it? So, what do you make of what she's saying?
Like I spoke to your producer, what's happening is that tearing up the truth and it's lying bleeding on the floor. Why doesn't everybody stop them when they say illegal migrants? Nobody's illegal until they've been processed.
Well, it depends which law you're talking about, Rob, doesn't it? You're right, under international law.
The ECHR, the International Convention on Human Rights, you are not an illegal migrant unless you've been processed.
You're right, but under domestic law, because of a piece of legislation the Conservatives introduced, anybody who comes here on a small boat is an illegal migrant. So I take your point, but it depends on which law you're talking about. He would say, look, in this country, arriving on a boat is illegal. You're also right to say, well, but of course, under international law, it isn't.
Well, which one takes precedence, Ben?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? And right now, the answer is international law.
No, it's not up for debate. It isn't up for debate at all. International law says we've got to take them and process them. If they're illegal, we'll send them back.
And that's why people like Richard Tice and Kemi Badenoch and even some Labour MPs are saying, it's all right. To be fair, Robert, even Jack Straw, David Blunkett, former Labour Home Secretaries, are also now basically agreeing with you and saying, yes, international law trumps what the government's trying to do, and it shouldn't anymore. They want to suspend the sorts of laws you're talking about.
I agree with them. It needs reform and needs looking at again. But like I say, a certain part of it. Don't forget the Conservatives were prepared to break international law in just a small way.
What, to suspend, to prorogue Parliament? And over Brexit as well. Yep, very true. Robert, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. 11:40 is the time. Richard Tice, you heard him say, look, we're going to have to strike a deal in Ukraine. It means working with Putin. We're going to have to strike a deal in Gaza. It means working with Hamas. Let's just talk about the very latest in Ukraine, because after, 2 weeks or so after that meeting in the Oval Office, no sign whatsoever that peace is any closer than it's been despite Donald Trump's efforts. At least 23 people killed in an overnight attack on Kyiv once again. The UK and the EU summoning this week Russian envoys. And one of the buildings damaged in that Russian strike earlier this week was the British Council building, as well as the European Commission building in Kyiv. Let's talk to the Ukraine Director for the British Council, Colin Gibbon joins us. Colin, great to have you with us here on LBC. Just talk to us about, if you would, what happened this week, how bad the damage was, and when you first heard that British Council buildings had been affected.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks for having me on. Good morning to you and your listeners. So, it was Thursday a.m., around about 5 a.m, that we know the first of the two missiles struck the building adjacent to the British Council in the central business district of Kyiv. And shortly after that, there was a second impact from another missile. It's known in the parlance as a double tap. It was, as I said, very shortly after the impact of the first one. The building strike was adjacent to the British Council. The damage from the blast was substantial to our building. It's pretty much obliterated the British Council's. We were in the ground floor and the first floor of the building. The internal fittings of the at this stage. And we're just absolutely, thankful that it wasn't 2.5 hours later when there might have been more people in that building, including some more British Council colleagues. One of our colleagues was there, the security guard, Sir He, and he was injured. He's been taken to hospital. He's making a recovery, thank God, and we send our thoughts to him and his family.
And your sense, I appreciate this is Colin, but your sense of whether this was just a random attack, or whether the EU building and indeed the British Council building, your building, were directly targeted by the Russians?
Look, I don't want to speculate about that, Ben, about whether or not it was deliberate or intentional, but it was certainly counterproductive for the Russians because it has simply redoubled our resolve to do more and more to help Ukraine create a confident, open, creative society and to be more internationally connected, to have more English language used in the country. We're absolutely determined that this will not deter us, so completely counterproductive. And what has been intentional from the Russians over the last 11, 12 years and since the full-scale invasion is the cynical and deliberate attack on the education and cultural infrastructure in Ukraine, because they know that it's education and culture that forms the expressions of freedom and the heartbeat of the country, and they want to quash that. And we're doing everything we can with our UK partners and our Ukrainian friends to try and make sure that Ukraine stays strong and internationally connected, particularly to the UK.
Do you feel like we're edging any closer to peace? Because we had the big Oval Office meeting, there was talk of a trilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin and Trump, and instead the bombs have kept coming, the missiles still raining down. Do you feel there like you're any closer to peace, or never further from it, perhaps?
peace is always possible, and I'll leave that to the politicians. Victory for Ukraine is also very possible. I can, when I'm talking about colleagues here and Ukrainians that I interact with every day and daily, they're stoic, they're determined, they're sad, they are absolutely driven to make sure that Ukraine will not be defeated.
I just I wonder what more you can just tell us lastly about the shooting dead, the apparent murder of Andrei Poruby, a prominent member of the Ukrainian parliament in Lviv in western Ukraine yesterday.
I can't comment on that. I don't have any of the details on that, Ben, but I would say British Council is very active in Lviv. We're doing a lot of work there because it's an important destination for us. We can bring UK people to Lviv, and that's important for us.
In terms of the UK's response to what happened this week in your building, summoning the Russian ambassador, clearly giving them the ticking off, do you have any faith that's going to make any difference?
Absolutely. We have had incredible support from the UK government, across Whitehall, Westminster, across the devolved governments. Really, really strong support. That has been so motivating, actually, for us to know that we've got people in the UK thinking about us and valuing our work so highly. So, I've been really impressed and very, very grateful to feel the support of all of our friends and partners in the UK for the British Council. And that goes from the highest levels right the way through to, friends and families, and it really has been extraordinary.
It's the absolute very least that you deserve, given the work you're doing, Colin, and I'm glad to hear that you've got it. Thank you very much, Dean, for talking to us this morning. Colin McGivern is Ukraine Director for the British Council, whose office in Kyiv was bombed on Thursday. Lots of calls coming in about the row, the immigration row. What should Britain do? Come back to those in just a couple of minutes' time. Ben Kentish here on LBC. The time now, 11:46.
Coming up at 12 on LBC, Ali Mirage.
It's been a torrid summer for Labour, with the Prime Minister's personal rating the worst of any party leader, and the party 15 points behind reform. What should Labour do to turn things around?
Ali Mirage on LBC.
Renault. An electric car grant is good, but an electric car grant on an award-winning Renault, where we do all the paperwork for you. Incroyable. Renault range now available with the electric car grant and 0% APR representative. Search Renault electric car grant. Order the 30th of September 2025. Exclude Channel Islands. PCP Mobilise Financial Services. Minimum deposit required. 18+. T's and C's apply.
At TfL, we're helping make roads safer. We're continuing to roll out lower speed limits because 20 miles per hour roads have already seen 24% fewer collisions causing death or serious injury. We're also improving junctions to help keep you safe, and improving visibility for our bus drivers with new wing mirror cameras. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Comparison of collisions data before and after implementation of 20 miles per hour speed limit.
At this vet, Mia's the owner, surgeon, rota manager and puppy wrangler. And now she and her team are cybersecurity experts too.
Mia, someone tried accessing our system. Phishing scam. I blocked it.
BT Security Awareness Training turns your team into your first line of defence. Quick to set up from just £1.25 per user per month. Cybersecurity is everyone's business. Thankfully not just Mia's. Search BT Business Cybersecurity. T&Cs apply. Prices exclude VAT at 20%. 12-month minimum term applies.
How will you react if you win big with Win Plus? Enter now at winplus.co.uk to get in the draw. 18+ GB only. T's and C's apply.
You've packed enough suitcases to know quality when you see it. Well, Saga Travel Insurance has been named a Which Best Buy. And now get 20% off when you buy before the 30th of September. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only, standard and plus on Which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Ben Kentish on LBC. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
It's time straight back to your calls about the state of the asylum debate in this country and whether you are happy for any government, whoever it is in power, to tear up, leave, suspend, change the human rights laws that quite a few politicians, Labour, Tory and Reform, are now saying stop us deporting people in the way that we should be doing. Should they just be getting on with changing those laws now? To Shreven in Hemel Hempstead this morning. How are you, Shreven?
I'm very well. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
To speak with you.
Firstly, I want to congratulate you on an excellent interview with the milk and biscuit. Your cross-examination was so good that you lost the track of night and day.
It wasn't even a cross-examination, to be honest. I was just asking him what he thought of something his party leader had said. He hadn't said it, fair enough, but then he seemed to think that was an outrageous thing to ask him.
No, that's right. And you pressed him so well that you lost track of night and day. Anyway, on this, I don't trust any of these politicians, including the previous guest, Richard Tice. None of these reformers, they're all talking a good game, but they will do the opposite if they do win the election. And I want to bring to your attention one thing which I did read a few weeks ago. I believe it was the Biden Times investigation, where they exposed a reform councillor who was using the ECHR law to protect himself from scrutiny of his new electorate.
Sure, I'm going to have to do Malcolm Rifkin here. I haven't seen the story you're talking about, but you're saying what? You think there's an element of hypocrisy.
That's right, exactly. Right. That's what I'm direct you to. It was on Byline Times. I read it myself 2 weeks ago, where they exposed a reform councillor, a newly reformed electoral council. You know, they won the seats in the byline in the elections. He was using ECHR to protect himself from the scrutiny of his constituents. This is true. You can look it up.
But I will look at it, truly. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. But on the ECHR generally, you know, Richard Tice was confirming there that under reform we would leave it. Britain would leave it. I think the Tories are sort of saying they'd look at maybe changing it. We've had 2 former Labour Home Secretaries this week say it should be temporarily suspended. What do you think should happen to it?
I think it's been very bad if they take it away, because that will give them excuse to send women and children back to their countries, to these oppressive regimes. I think it's very bad, and I believe, Ben, I'm worried about this, that they will carve UK in the image of Trump's America. Currently, we only the ICE teams, the ICE teams are going around.
To be fair, Richard Tice said that there's a lot to learn from Zia Youssef, who's the Reform chairman, is talking this weekend about them wanting to be sort of Trump 2.0. Richard Tice said to me, there's a lot to learn from the Trump administration on immigration. Does that trouble you?
That does trouble me, because if you look, when the Trump in the first term, when he was deporting all these immigrants, he was putting the children in the cells. You remember this few years ago. I don't trust any of these. They will do this. That's what worried the direction this country is going into. And to completely abolish the ECHR is not very good. I know there is some ridiculous cases in the past where, somebody did not like the chicken nuggets or something.
Yes, but again, yes, I know the case you're talking about, Phil. It was somebody who was a former criminal who wasn't deported because of a claim that his child looked like the chicken nuggets abroad. There was a lot more detail to that case. Turned out the child had all sorts of other problems, and that was just one example. But yes, I'm not saying for a minute that people haven't been deported who really should have been because of some of these laws. Is that a reason to sort of do away with it completely? Not so sure. Lovely to talk to you, Shriven. Thank you very much for calling in. Tomasz is in Worcester. Morning, Tomasz.
Morning, Ben. How are you doing?
Yeah, fine, thank you, sir. What do you make of this? What do you think we should be doing about the ECHR?
Actually, starting with the, whether or should we not do that, I would say that if Conservatives or Reform for that measure are in government again, we should absolutely deport all of the migrants, actually starting with women and children for their own safety.
Starting with women and children? If Reform... what, because you think they'd be more at risk here than they would be from where they've come from?
Well, I'm being sarcastic.
I think I
can
tell.
But that's the naval code that, if the ship is sinking, women and children first, right?
Are you really worried about that? Because obviously Reform have been saying a lot recently they are the ones standing up for the safety of women and children.
I mean, in fairness, if a 70 million strong country is afraid of 50,000 people, even given majority of them are young men seeking to better their life, that actually tells you everything you need to know about that, right? But in being serious about it, I would really prefer to see that the UK takes something of a German approach to it. Because, Germans are accepting a lot more refugees, and they actually have a system that works quite well.
There's just no sort of democratic mandate for it, Thomas, is there? If a party said, right, we are going to double the number of asylum seekers we've let in, I don't think they'd win a seat in Parliament.
No, and that's actually pretty sad, because this event became so polarized that people are not even looking for a common sense right now. You can either be 100% one way or the other, and anyone who's trying to find a common sense middle ground is automatically disclosed from the debate.
Why do you think we should take in even more than we are, Thomas?
Well, I have not necessarily said that, although I wouldn't mind. I would say that we need a much better processing system like the Germans have, for example, right? So like a professional detention center where you go for 3 to 6 months where you're being assessed, processed, there is a social worker, you have extensive English lessons, there is a job assessment. So, because right now the way it works in the UK is like you land randomly in Devon, right? Then you go to a hotel for 2 years and you're giving pocket money to buy yourself rice and beans. And then after 2 years, if you're successful, you just kick out into the street. And I think, honestly, as a country, Great Britain can do much better than that.
Thomas, lovely to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much. I don't think you speak for some people, I don't think you speak for the majority, and that's why the sort of politicians are clambering over each other at the moment to see who can be the toughest on asylum. But good to have a voice sort of arguing against that. Thank you for calling in. Mark's in Hitchin. Hi, Mark.
Yeah, hi, Ben. Right. Sorry, there's a very important point that Richard Tice made in your interview, which he has said in an earlier interview this week. And this is my angle. Be careful what you wish for. He told you that they would remove our Human Rights Act, 1998, and then at some point they would introduce a Bill of Rights.
Which would only apply to British citizens.
Right. Forget all that. That's fine. What's going to happen between one being repealed and the other one being written? There's going to be a gap. That means that my human rights, your human rights, my daughter's human rights, my grandchildren's human rights will be severely weakened because the government won't be held accountable by any outside body. Well, hang on. How long do you think it will take to, one, repeal the Act and then write a new Bill of Rights? You're talking years. So for 1, 2, possibly 3 years, we will not have any human rights law in the UK. Yes. So me, you, I'm not talking about mine, but I don't want to get that. I want my human rights protected. And Tice wants to take them.
But I hear you, Mike. I do worry that people, not everybody who lives here and isn't a British citizen has come here on a small boat by any means. Obviously, the vast majority of people who live in Britain, despite not being citizens, happen to come here and come here perfectly legally. What Reform is saying is not, we'll diminish your rights if you come here on a small boat. They're saying that their new human rights law, their British Bill of Rights, would only apply to British citizens. So if you came to this country as a child and you've built a life here and you got married here and you've contributed but you haven't actually got a British passport, then you would have fewer rights under a Reform government than the British person living next door to you. Which for a party that talks a lot about two-tier justice, and Mr Tice even accepted that is two-tier justice,
showroom for a test drive. PCP, T's and C's apply, and September 30th. Smart UK Automotive Limited are a credit broker, not a lender.
Ali Mirage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Ali Mirage on LBC 1251. What should Labour do to turn things around? 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Trevor, I'll come to your call in a moment. Richard says this. Ali, why is anyone surprised? Labour looked hopeless in opposition, so why would it be any different when in power? Starmer is reactive, not proactive, and the party came into government with no clear plan. David, first-time messenger, says until the government addresses the benefits and pension issue, nothing will ever happen. And with the current backbenchers, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Putting up taxes will just send more better people off the board. True as well. Trevor mentioned. Good afternoon.
I don't know. I'd just like to say we've got some of the best companies in the world. We've got British Aerospace, we've got AstraZeneca, we've got British Airways, we used to have ARM, we've got NVIDIA, we've got so many, we've got well, we don't have big embarrassment of riches. So I don't understand why we're always in this position where our guilt is so high, we've no faith in the country, politicians can't do anything. Well, actually, the people who are running the business can do the thing. Our perspective is about the bank. HSBC is a big company, and NatWest Bank's a big bank, and they've stuck the crash, they come out the other side. They may be on the top, but I'm sorry for people who lose their houses, I'm sorry for people who are country, and there's things that should be done for people like that. People who come to this country with the hope that they're going to improve on their lives, they do it because they realise this is a great country. We have some great things to offer. And frankly, I think we should talk about that more. I don't know if the government should do so.
Look, firstly, I think you mentioned NVIDIA. I think that's an American product, not a British one. You're mentioning generally that British business is thriving and doing well. Some businesses may be, Trevor, but I speak to investors in this country every day of the week. And I also speak to business, and I'm trained as a chartered accountant, so I've been steeped in business for the best part of my whole career, 30 years. So, look, my sense is that people are trying to do the best of the situation. They have no love lost at all for the Tories. They think they were a disaster. They were hoping for better from these guys. But they feel, in many cases, that this is moving in the wrong direction, that there isn't sufficient business acumen at the top of the government. I'm not sure they feel that Minish Shafiq's going to change that. Let's see how she does. So I'm not sure about that. But what I do think, and this is why the borrowing costs are so high, Trevor, the markets, basically debt investors that buy our debt, right, which in many cases are pension funds, insurance companies, foreign governments buying this stuff, okay? What it's saying is they don't have confidence in the long-term plan for this country. That's why the borrowing cost is going up.
Well, for me, I would say we've got to talk our country up and say that we are a good country. We have some of the most brilliant minds in the world in this country. We have some of the top universities. We may be, I mean, Oxford is always top of the poll. Cambridge is not far behind. Imperial is fantastic. Manchester, Edinburgh, Cardiff, University College London.
But then, Trevor, you need to. But then, Trevor, I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. But then we need to actually incentivise people in this country to go and do better and get the productivity rate up in this country, which is very, very low. So I agree with you. We have wonderful things in this country, absolutely, which is why we're a magnet for so many people wanting to come here. I don't disagree. But I just feel absolutely woeful that there's a sense of A, drift in the country by the government, and B, a lack of honesty on everyone's part, not just government. I don't just blame government for this, on all of our parts to address the fundamental things that we can't have our cake and eat it, can we, Trevor?
Well, okay, maybe we need to retrain people. It's just a thing that they can only live beyond in the means, like the Margaret Thatcher would say. You can't, if you haven't got any money, you can't spend it. Don't work, you can't eat. Fair enough.
Well, I mean, that might be a bit extreme, but I do think we need. I do think the welfare bill is just far too high, and I actually support the government in its efforts to try and get people off welfare and into work. Completely scuppered by the same backbenchers. Trevor, thank you for your call. Kay in Edgware, good afternoon.
I'm just going to piggyback on what Trevor said because he literally stole most of the points I was going to say. We have the first or the second highest tax registration in the world. So the smartest minds are here, right? But the difference is when you go to places like America, as much as I don't have to say this, Silicon Valley has actually got Wall Street next to them, where they've got investors that invest.
Well, it's not next to them. Wall Street's on the other side of the thing, but they do have access to capital. Yes.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Okay, cool. So they've got them. Me saying that they've got them next to them.
Yes.
In terms of them getting that kind of money.
I understand.
To say the truth, I really want that to happen so we can play some more base businesses that I can follow, so I can start shooting all the American companies.
But Kay, on a serious note, though, this is important. The point you're making about innovation and access to capital, and also risk appetite of American investors, particularly in tech, is totally different to what you'll find in the UK, right? I mean, people there have got a completely different attitude to failure. They are much more willing to give people a chance with a good idea, and if it fails, fine, you learn from the failure and move on and try and build up and make an improvement next time. Over here, it's shock horror. Our risk appetite's much, much more conservative here.
What's so funny about what you're saying, right? I've got family there, so I used to travel there quite often as a child, right? And the one thing that they always used to do was take the mickey out of my accent. It used to really, 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 really annoy me. So I'm allowed to criticise a little bit, but I digress. And again, they have a very positive stereotype in terms of the way we speak. They believe we're much, much more intelligent. So I feel like to say this: if they can believe that and they've got the risk appetite to do stuff like that, do you not think if they saw us doing the same and backing our own businesses and brilliant minds as well, that they want to be people fighting hand over fist and ensuring the American companies as well doesn't get
True, Kay, but then you know what? The culture is completely different in America. It's very, very focused on success and money. And it is what it is, right? It's not for everyone. Over here, we are moving much, much more to a socialist European model where to actually be successful in terms of money, success is that's not the only measure of success, but on this one, money, making lots of it, is frowned upon, and you shall be hammered kingdom come if you make a few bob. Kay, very good to speak to you. Sorry to cut you off. I've got to get to Dave. Dave in Bracknell. Good afternoon.
Hi there. I just think we should get rid of worshipping at the shrine of neoliberalism, which means that we sold off a lot of our industry. We've got one of the biggest companies in the world in Bracknell, and I went along to ask about working there. And I met someone who was a contractor. He said, I'm the last one out. And that basically, a lot of these companies have got no loyalty to Britain. I believe the field I'm in, that's been farmed out to Southern Ireland. And Bracknell has been hollowed out completely. It used to be called Silicon Valley, Mark II. Every one of the companies has left or moved elsewhere. But a lot of them, like one of the computer companies I worked for was American, they've gone back to America. So we need a bit more loyalty to American companies and get rid of them.
Okay, I understand that. But we also, Dave, need to make it attractive for companies to start here and stay here, and they don't feel that at the moment in sufficient numbers. Dave, very good to speak to you. Thank you. Interesting discussion. Now, the most comprehensive poll of British 16 and 17-year-olds reveals a generation in the grip of a confidence crisis that is particularly acute amongst girls, with more than 33% saying they suffered from anxiety. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
Newsroom at 1 o'clock. The Education Secretary has told LBC she's deeply troubled by the number of students missing school. She calls on parents to do more to improve attendance. Extra support is being announced by the Department for Education, which will see head teachers who have reduced absenteeism and bad behaviour working with hundreds of schools. Bridget Phillipson has told Ben Kentish on LBC more also needs to be done in the home.
Parents do have a responsibility to make sure their children are in school, but I do recognise is that for some parents and for some children that can be more difficult, whether that's around mental health and wellbeing challenges. That's why we're expanding mental health support. For children with special educational needs and disabilities, that's why we'll be setting out more detail later on this year about improving the system of support for children with SEND.
Bridget Phillipson also told LBC that Reform UK was ramping up tensions over asylum hotels. She said it served the party's interest to whip up anger over immigration. This weekend saw arrests after a group of men tried to enter a hotel in London that houses asylum seekers. The party's deputy leader, Richard Tice, told LBC that Reform was standing up for the interests of ordinary people and was not using inflammatory language.
It might upset some people in the establishment class in and around Westminster. Let me tell you, in Boston and Skegness and my constituency, it doesn't upset almost anybody. I'll tell you what it is, it's the truth, and that's how they talk about it, and they appreciate me standing up for their interests.
Police have begun a murder investigation after the death of a 25-year-old woman in Southampton. Emergency services say she was found with serious injuries on Thursday afternoon after falling from a block of flats. She died in hospital on Friday. The UK Health Security Agency says it's concerned about falling vaccination rates for whooping cough. They say a baby has become the first person in the UK this year to die with the disease. The mother was not vaccinated. The Conservatives say expanding oil and gas exploration in the North Sea will bring down energy bills and reduce reliance on foreign imports. They're pledging to maximise extraction of fossil fuels if they are re-elected. LBC weather, scattered showers developing across much of the UK today. Quiet at times with some brighter skies, particularly in the east. A high of 22 degrees. From Global's newsroom, LBC.
They also was in the Times. Age of Anxiety poll reveals teen views on stress, social media, and school. They lost months of schooling for the COVID lockdowns, have been exposed to an explosion of online pornography, and have had more screen time and access to social media than ever before. Now, the most comprehensive poll of British 16 and 17-year-olds reveals the widespread repercussions for their development, education, and social lives. It shows a generation in the grip of a confidence crisis that is particularly acute among girls. More than 33% of girls surveyed said they suffered from anxiety. In answer to a separate question, nearly 70% of girls said anxiety had led them to skip school, according to this poll. As they prepare to return to education this week, the words favoured to describe their work were, and I quote, hard, difficult, challenging, stressful, and scary. Ben Kentish this morning.
It's a complex pattern that we see. There'll be some children within that group who have more acute mental health concerns. There'll be others where it's perhaps lower level, but the pandemic, I do think, had a big impact. It took a toll on lots of our children. The time that they spent away from their friends. Being in school is, yes, it's about the education, it's about the skills to go on to your next stage in life, but it's also about building friendships, building confidence, developing as an individual, and children did miss out a lot during the pandemic.
Well, Bridget Phillipson was clearly worried about kids attending school, as I am sure you are. There are multiple complicated reasons in some cases for that. Like I said, about anxiety, use of anxiety. I'm sure that for some kids, COVID, the pandemic, has something to do with it. But I think it is much deeper than that. Whilst boys, by the way, according to this piece, have been the focus of concern regarding educational underachievement, studying more than 1,100 16 and 17-year-olds paints a more worrying picture for girls, who tended to have lower life satisfaction and were more likely to feel that they lacked purpose in life. 16 and 17-year-olds, just compute this, just think about this for a second. 16 and 17-year-olds, and particularly girls, saying that they feel that they lacked a purpose in life. That's pretty disturbing. Now, the poll, which was conducted by Boric consulted by organised online focus groups with young people across the world, where they spoke of their fears for the future, the effects of the pandemic and the impact of social media together. With the poll, it offers a rare insight into the lives of the next generation of voters and what makes them tick. Now, it's interesting because obviously, as a friend of the programme, spoken many times to him from the poll, said this: whilst there is rightly been a focus on young men, this poll highlights serious challenges facing young women, higher reported levels of anxiety and mental health problems, worries about body image, and lower life satisfaction. In a few important ways, it does seem like some kids are not, in fact, all right. Now, that's a pollster telling you this. I mean, that's a wake-up call, isn't it? I'm just going to pause there for a second and ask you this question. If this is indeed the case, and this is a pretty extensive survey, and you're talking about the cohort here of 16 and 17-year-olds who either missed most of their last year in primary school and their first year in secondary school, or the first 2 years of secondary school because of the pandemic, and 48% said closing schools and moving learning online did more harm than good, compared to 48% more good. So, on average, worse. They feel it was worse for them. It throws up this question for me. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973 text 8484. Ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC See, I would like to hear from you. If you are young, if you are 16 or 17, younger than that, please do call with the permission of your parents or whoever the bill payer is. I would like to hear from you directly on how you're feeling. We'll be back at school in the next few days. How are you feeling about going back to school? Do you recognise this from the poll findings that younger people, particularly girls, are feeling much more anxious, and they are using words like, when it comes to returning to education, that it's going to be hard, difficult, challenging, stressful, and scary. Scary. I mean, look, I don't want to talk about, in my day it was like this. I mean, the most scary thing about going back to school when I was at school, I guess, was not scary, but obviously, new timetable, new year group, new challenges, got to get a new pencil case. I mean, this was the most stressful part of it, right? Making sure you've got a protractor and a set square. I mean, if this is seriously now causing such issues that people are feeling that they're having social issues and they're genuinely feeling anxious, which is the case here, then what's going on? What is happening here? I'd like to hear from you if you're young. What do you think is happening here? Do you recognise this? Do you feel this way yourself? If so, what has caused this? What is causing this for you? And what do you need from us, society, yourself, your teachers, your friends, whatever? What do we need to do to support you, to get you into a better, more constructive, healthier place where you're not feeling anxious? Or do you think that we need to sort of embrace anxiety as a normal part of everyday life, where we reframe the conversation around anxiety to not make it such a mental health concern all the time, unless it's clearly acute, of course, but actually to just sit with it and to let it settle and to think about mechanisms to move through that period, because it will pass. So is there that element of it? So I want to hear from you if you're a young person. I'd like to hear from you if you're a teacher, if you recognise this, and if you are concerned about it. And again, what are schools doing in this regard to try and help address some of these concerns? Do you feel that too much is put on schools to really be the social workers and the psychologists and the psychotherapists and everything else in this scenario? Because you are there to teach. But I would like to hear from you if you're facing this in your schools, and if you're a parent or a grandparent, do you recognise this, and what do you think is causing it? What is happening here? I mean, if you've got 24% of 16 and 17-year-olds saying that they have anxiety, rising to 34% amongst girls, and anxiety is the most common condition reported, which had either been professionally or self-diagnosed. What's going on? What's happening here? What do you think this is down to? Now, there's another couple of statistics I just want to chuck at you here. I'm sorry I'm bombarding a lot of percentages at you. But apparently the biggest fear amongst the age group was about exams, school, college, with 48% of those saying that they worried a lot about it. Worrying about exams in school. And this is par for the course, normal stuff that everyone has to go through, right? Of course it's stressful. It's not always fun. But anxiety at this level? There was also a proportion of 25 to 34-year-olds who basically are not so concerned about where they're going to live. It's not their main concern. It's more concerned about short-term things like anxiety and going to school. And wait for this one. 40% of girls said they often felt they had no purpose in life, compared with 29% of boys. I mean, that itself, and I speak as someone who has young nieces and nephews who I love dearly. I mean, this is deeply concerning and disturbing, right? Yes, there's greater exposure to online porn and all this stuff. That seems to be an issue amongst boys. Boys are more likely to watch this. Girls are more likely to be exposed to this. Maybe that's an issue. But I tell you, and I'm not a psychologist, but I've read quite a lot about this stuff. And you remember Jonathan Haidt's book, The American Psychologist, The Anxious Generation, came out last year. He really focuses on the fact that this is coincides with the prevalence of smartphones from the 2010s. This is what Haidt says, that if you look at the stats, the growing anxiety, particularly amongst young people, diagnosis of depression and anxiety more than doubled between 2010 and 2018. That period coincides with the exponential rise in use of smartphones. It's no coincidence, according to Haidt. People are spending more time on their screens, less time socializing, and indeed, according to this poll by More in Common, it showed that 42% will spend more than 6 hours a day on their phone, and 9% will spend more than 10 hours. Now, 42% are spending more than 6 hours on their phone. Now, if they're all reading the Financial Times and the Economist and the Guardian and the Telegraph and the Times and whatever, the Spectator, the New Statesman, and any other website, fine. If you're educating yourself, or you're watching or you're listening to podcasts and you're learning about the world, and fine. But what are young people doing online for this amount of hours in a day? Because I would posit that probably has something to do with this. But I don't know. I want to hear from you if this is the case. Are you struggling with this? If you are a young person, if you are a parent, how are you dealing with it as a teacher? And if you're someone who's looking at this as an observer from a little bit further away, how did we get into this position where we have an anxious generation whose childhood is no longer play-based, but phone-based? Do we need to therefore think about some radical rewiring of our own? Jonathan Haidt calls this period the great rewiring of childhood. Do we need to fight back and have our own rewiring by potentially getting down to Australia and banning social media use from this extent? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. But this is very worrying indeed. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. I'm Roger, LBC 116.
This is LBC.
With over 50 years' experience, at Fidelity, we believe there's a difference between investing and being invested. Investing is having access to guidance, tools, and expert insights. Being invested means feeling confident about your future. Investing is choosing from a wealth of investment options. Being invested means focusing on your long-term goals. For ISAs, pensions, or advice, be truly invested with Fidelity. Go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
Power up your business with Peugeot's new LCV range. Discover the new Partner, Expert and Boxer, available in all electric or diesel, with up to 20 driver assistance systems and complete connectivity. Now available at 0% APR with a 20% deposit. Order before 30th September 2025 to drive away in your new Peugeot van. Peugeot, business power. Conditional sale, business users only, subject to status and availability. T's and C's 18+. Stellantis Financial Services.
Would anyone like some Bourneville dark chocolate? Is it so dark the aftertaste lasts for a week? No.
Does it taste really, really complicated?
That's because it's saturated in nibs.
So dark it comes with a therapist?
To the uneducated palate, does it taste like burnt tyre?
Would scientists compare the taste to dark matter?
Is it artisanal in all caps?
Are the tasting notes gloom?
No pretentiousness, no complexity, no bitterness. Just smooth dark chocolate from Cadbury. Cadbury Bourneville. Made to be enjoyed, not endured.
As it's free to sell in your local area on eBay, I was thinking maybe I should sell that bench press. Oh, that's literally been benched. And this guitar that I've forgotten how to play. Must be the buyer for the chest of drawers I listed yesterday. And I'm still in my pyjamas. Be with you in a sec.
With new listing features, it's easy to sell for free in your local area on eBay. Download the app now. eBay. Things people love. T's and C's apply. Excludes vehicles.
Ali Mirage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Ali Miraj on LBC 118. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. I want to hear from you if you are a young person, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a grandparent, if you're just a normal human being who's worried about this and just thinks, how do we get to this situation and what can we do about it? 0345 6060 973. Steve, a first-time caller in Birmingham. Welcome, Steve.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that 16 and 17-year-olds don't really or don't know what their purpose is. I mean, what adults know what their purpose is? I mean, it's quite a, profound question to ask a 16 or 17-year-old. I mean, I think it's about discovering your purpose at that age, and maybe in your 20s is too these days. It's about discovery, I think, a lot more now. I mean, what were you doing when you were 16 after you finished your GCSEs? Do you think you had a purpose then?
Yeah, but why are people even thinking about their purpose at 16? I didn't think about, no one asked me, what's your purpose at 16? I mean, why are they even being led to think about purpose at that stage?
Because people are a lot more deep and profound these days, People aren't so trivial and materialistic as we're led to believe sometimes. I think people do care about their existence, their day-to-day, other people. People have empathy, people are intelligent, it's a good thing to know your purpose, but I think also to know one's purpose, you need to know oneself and sort of know where you are and where you're going and sort of things like that. It's quite a profound question, and a 16 or 17-year-old, I wouldn't expect, it's philosophy essentially, isn't it? Asking someone what their purpose is. I mean, what's your purpose being an LBC presenter?
My purpose is to actually inform, entertain and inspire.
Well, there you go. That's it. I'm glad you've got a clear answer on that.
Yeah, and also to hold, my purpose actually fundamentally is to hold the space for a spirited public discourse in an environment that is increasingly polarised, where people speak across each other and don't have respect. I think that's what my purpose is. And in fact, I've come to this purpose after a long time in politics and business and other things, thinking about, quite profoundly, about where I think I can make an incremental difference while I'm still on this earth to try and move the discourse forward in a positive way. Now, I'm not saying that a 16-year-old really needs to think about it. I do accept your point, Steve, that maybe they're open to more influences, more profound thinking than they ever were. But, I mean, if 40% of girls are feeling that they had no purpose in life, I mean, what do we then do, Steve? I mean, how do we have these conversations then? Or should we just sit back and relax about it?
Yeah, sit back and relax. I mean, why not? I mean, no, only joking. I mean, really...
that might be a strategy. I don't know. I'm genuinely asking. I actually don't know.
It's about discovery. I mean, like I say, when you look at the word purpose, the dictionary definition, the reason for which something is done or created, which, the reason something is done or created, or for which something exists. So again, so why do we do what we do? What are we doing in our daily life? Why do we wake up and brush our teeth? Some people who have anxiety don't brush their teeth. Do you know what I mean? Some people will lay in bed because they can't move. So what's the reason they're doing that? And what's the reason they're doing what they enjoy, what they dislike? If you're doing something you dislike, why are you doing what you don't like? If you're doing something you like, do more of it. It's about, for me, anxiety is a bit basically fear, isn't it? And then the things that kind of combat fear are kind of confidence, which isn't necessarily created overnight, but courage, being courageous, making a decision, taking a leap forward, you're making a single step forward, doing that thing that you don't normally do, that you might want to try, putting yourself out there, but obviously when that happens, you're going to expect comeback or feedback,
So on the comeback and feedback, where's that coming from? Online, from other peers? Flesh that out.
Well, it's always come from our peers. Children are pain sort of cruel to each other, and adults are cruel to each other.
They are cruel to each other. But has that been amplified, the cruelty element? Because children can be nasty to them. I see it. Do you think that that's been amplified by this medium of social media? I don't want to jump to that conclusion, but I'm just interested.
Well, I think it's just a lot easier to find it these days. You go on social media for research and social reasons. So I think the internet's a great tool. I personally didn't grow up with the internet. It was coming out, and we used to go on MSN Messenger. There'd be a group of us, and then we'd be on MSN Messenger. There might be a group the awesome way, you know, on MSN Messenger. But I was actually walking around the park with a friend of mine, and it was the after summertime, so we saw a group of young girls sitting there on a boat doing the same thing, you know, calling the couple, maybe a boy or someone, saying, "Oh, what are you doing?" So the same sort of thing happened, really. You sort of, the internet and social media, it's a social tool. You know, the media is a social tool, so it's just another way to engage socially when you look at it. But obviously, you can do it on your own, isolated. But really, you still want to have that social group. You need to form groups. So people are isolated. I think they, be advisable for them to have a group.
What do you make of, Steve, the sociologist Sherry Turner, who puts this phone-based childhood epidemic that we're facing, that smartphones have pulled us away from our immediate surroundings and the people closest to us, rendering us forever elsewhere? I mean, we're never present, are we?
Yeah, but that's if you allow it to happen, you know. I mean, it's how engaged are people anyway. So if people are just engaging with a screen and I mean, we all do it. We're all doing stuff.
Yeah, but kids, I'm more worried about kids, though. I mean, if you're older, it's not great for anyone, frankly, at any age, but if you're older, then, you can manage it more. You're 16, 17-year-old, your brain's still developing at that point, right? It worries me.
I can't speak from like physiological development, not a neurological development, or that sort of stuff, but it's basically, it's better on me. It's activity, isn't it? When kids play cricket, football, basketball, netball, I think social engagement is very big. So if people are socially engaging online, that's also good in a way. But obviously, people's base identity comes out, don't they? And people's emotions aren't necessarily in check. People don't have some self-control.
Well, you see, Steve, something's got worse somewhere. This is what I'm struggling with. So,
what's the difference about it? What makes you think it's got worse?
Well, because the polling is telling us that, I mean, this was not the case before. This was not the case
previously, were they?
I guess I don't know how many polls were done previously, but this is a topic and a conversation that is being talked about a lot more now. I mean, depression and anxiety was not talked about at this level at all 20, 30 years ago. Simply wasn't.
No, I agree.
Wasn't in the lexicon to that degree at all. Not amongst kids. So it's definitely changing.
When I was at school, I probably had anxiety, depression, but really, it's just you're feeling down. And I used to skip school. Not all the time, but I was pulled up at school. I used to skip school enough that I was. My mum got involved. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't go out and play on the street. I fell out with some friends basically at school after a house party at my house, and and then I've kind of fell out with my sort of pool of friends in my school, and then I started skipping school. I still had friends, but that can be one cause of anxiety when you sort of you know the engagement changes and it's not on your terms.
But do you think that there's an issue here to see, or do you think it's being blown up out of proportion?
I mean, it's individualistic, isn't it? You can only comment on what there's
Yes and no, because I don't agree with that. Yes, of course, individuals will have their own concerns, but if there is a general trend of people feeling more anxious and depressed and worried and scared even about school, and the common factor here seems to be the rise in mobile phone usage. I just think one doesn't have to be that intelligent to work out that something's going awry somewhere.
Well, I used to go to Scouts when I was a kid, so how that's an activity. So how many children are engaged in activities like play sports, media, so film creation, theatre? What are the engagement statistics around these activities and things that put people in a group setting and take them away from their phone? The phone is like a boredom tool, isn't it?
Well, that's true.
You don't know what else to do.
Yes.
If you're stuck on your phone, you don't know what else to do. Like, as an adult, you come home from work and you did email, and if you're not getting out, not to a comedy club or to meet friends or something, you can do all sorts of things. In your 4 hours, you go to the gym, go play sport, but people are just, arguably, it's a boredom tool. Well, it's a tool for research, it's a tool for, engagement. But yeah, that would be my sort of encourage sort of people
and I'd ask this question: why would a young person not feel anxious in the modern world? And to put it briefly and crudely, I'd say that we are now entering a new age of anxiety. In other words, the manifestations of anxiety the young people are exhibiting are quite reasonable responses to the objective conditions of where they find themselves in.
Any more objective than the fact that we had a Falklands War when I was growing up?
Well, I would say so. As I say, if you look at the world that young people are confronted with, and adding in some of the points you've already rehearsed with others and your efforts to sociology, the world is brought into a state of young people in a way never before. They are exposed to climate change, to egregious inequalities, to world wars going on all across the world, turbulent labour market, and so on and so forth. The objective conditions that they're faced with now are really quite stark. Now, if we look back over the last 100 or 200 years, probably we go through these spasms of anxiety every 50 years or so. I'm old enough to remember existential philosophy in the 1950s. And here we, as it were, go again. I'm in the academic world, and there we see the matter of student anxiety being very real, very serious, and being taken very seriously.
But Ron, is that helpful to take it so seriously, other than to say to people, if someone's genuinely facing anxiety and depression, clinically, that's one thing. But if people are struggling with the everyday stressors, and then one's pandering to this, is that actually helping?
Well, if I can say so, you put it rather tendentiously, Ali. What I would say is that the students are not, or young people are not wallowing in their own personal psychological difficulties. But there are real global structures and movements going on, which the intelligent young person is very aware of. And given that situation, they are in great difficulty. But they are only, if I can say so, exhibiting in probably an extreme form what many people in the world, particularly in the West and in the global world, are going through. And I'm hypothesizing that the UK is worse placed in this matter than many other, even advanced countries. If we look at continental Europe, by and large, I sense that there is much more of a public sphere, a community spirit, where people feel aligned and part of larger communities. In a way, we're losing in the UK. So, as I say, if you multiply all the objective and subjective conditions of life of young people, it's not surprising at all that they feel anxious. This isn't a personal matter. It's not a matter, if I can say so much for the psychologists. It is a matter, as some of your other subscribers have said this morning, for the sociologists and the philosophers.
Thank you very much indeed, Ron. I think a lot to chew over there and unpick, which I will do after the break. Ron, thank you very much indeed for your call. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. You listen to Ali Raj on LBC 132, the news headlines, and Rachel Rowe.
The Education Secretary says parents need to play a bigger role in reducing levels of absenteeism and bad behaviour in schools. The Department for Education says hundreds of thousands of parents will be given support from head teachers who have a track record of improving attendance. Labour has accused Reform UK of ramping up tensions over asylum hotels. The party's deputy leader, Richard Tice, told LBC that the party was standing up for the interests of ordinary people and was not using inflammatory language. Greta Thunberg and Susan Sarandon are on board one of the ships preparing to set sail for the Gaza Strip with humanitarian aid. The convoy is made up of people from 44 countries who are hoping to get through the Israeli blockade and bring food, water and medicine to Gaza. LBC weather, scattered showers develop across much of the UK today, those heaviest in the west. Drier at times with some brighter spells, particularly in the east, a high of 22 degrees.
This is LBC.
Here comes Steve, with the satisfied smile of a man who's checking out at midday after a great night's sleep and a delicious unlimited brekkie. See the untamable bedhead hair, and if you look really close, you can see that properly well-rested glow. Which can only mean one thing. Last night he slept at Premier Inn. Get better sleep for your money. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Breakfast subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Smart cars just got bigger and bolder. The Smart #1 and #3 are all-electric 5-seater SUVs. Now with an extra £1,500 Smart EV car grant across the range. That's up to £4,500 off the Smart #1 and 0% APR. Visit your nearest Smart showroom for a test drive. PCP, T's and C's apply, and September 30th. Smart UK Automotive Limited are a credit broker, not a lender.
Mr. Thing is enjoying a lovely summer's day. He's trimmed the hedge, he's cut the grass, and best of all, he's just had 25% snipped off his home care cover, meaning his boiler, electrics, plumbing and drains are now covered for less. Chop chop, sign up today. This offer ends soon. Search British Gas home care cover. Watch out for that rake, Mr. Thing. Ouch! Too late. British Gas. Taking care of things. T's and C's apply. Offer not available to existing home care and boiler service contract customers. Ends 9th of September 2025.
Well, I need an items. I don't go to Specsavers.
One thing you won't see at Specsavers is me.
Do I know?
Yes!
I mean, no. Me? I don't go to Specsavers. Nor do you, here's me.
Should have gone to Specsavers.
Hi, Specsavers. Here for your items.
They come to me instead.
If you can't go to Specsavers on a company, we could come to you. See if you're eligible at specsavers.co.uk/home visits.
This is LBC with Ali Mirage. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Ali Mirage on LBC 136. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. This is really very disturbing that in the most comprehensive poll of British 16 to 17-year-olds, widespread repercussions for development, education and social lives. More than 33% of girls saying they suffer from anxiety. Boys have got their own issues, but it's a very worrying picture for girls in particular. With 40% saying they often find their goals in life compared to 29% of boys having into this position. And how do we get out of it? And how do we find the right language to have these conversations? If so, what's happening? I'd love to hear your stories, and also the conversations you have. For a parent, and get your perspective, the teacher, the same. And if you're interested in this topic, as I do, please share your thoughts. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973. Joining me, Sue Atkins, parenting expert, author of the book Parenting Made Easy: How to Raise Happy Children, and host of the Navigating the Digital Jungle podcast. Missing out soon. I think we all need to understand how to navigate the digital jungle. Sue, what's going on? When I read these facts from this poll, it worries me. What's happening?
Well, absolutely worrying too. I read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, back last year. I went to see him speak. It's heartbreaking what's been happening. Anxiety, depression, overwhelm, unprecedented levels. So we've got to look at why that should be, and there's no simple, quick answer necessarily, but I do think smartphones have a major part in this conversation, actually, and delaying them. And then talking with your kids, not at them, and having conversations involved with them. I mean, they're all going to want one at 11 now, going to secondary school, but we can give them a brick phone or a smart watch. And I think it's important that we're involved with them and taking them into real life, into real situations, because the smartphone detaches them and you don't know what they're seeing, what they're hearing and what they're reading, as we saw in, that Netflix drama, Adolescence. Yeah.
What what do you say to one of my callers, Steve, who made the point when I made this point about the fact that 40% of girls, which is a huge number in this poll, saying they felt they lack a purpose in life. Steve said to me, well, did you know your purpose at 16? Which is a fair point. I mean, it's quite a profound thing. What is leading people to be thinking about such profound questions? Should we actually be embracing the fact that they're thinking in perhaps a deeper way, a more philosophical way than previous generations, if that's the case?
Or is it because they are being compared all the time?
Yes, well, I don't know. What do you think, Sue?
I think, let's face it, humanity is pretty similar going back different generations, but the pressures now through digital devices and constantly online, we're the same, aren't we, adults? We're constantly connected. So we've got to try and talk and teach children to detach from some of the devices, and not by nagging and just shouting at them and get off your device and all of that. It's about it's connection over correction in my book. And you do it really early, because I'm concerned about the early years. I've written an article and a guide actually called Screen-Free Early Years, because the habits start when you see those toddlers being handed the smartphones in restaurants and, seeing the smartphone put on the push chairs and all the rest of it. So they're not really in the full world, are they? They're kind of passive and receiving information all the time.
Yes.
And I think conversations and doing things together, being bored is quite good, to be honest.
Exactly, but boredom is actually an essential part of creativity as well. But there's another point that was raised by one of my callers as well, which I found quite interesting, was he was saying that you're asking the wrong question. You should actually be asking, why wouldn't someone be anxious in the modern world, right? Because we're facing poly-crises, perma-crises, got climate change, you've got wars all over the place. We've got concerns about AI and jobs, got concerns about whether you're going to get on the housing ladder, have a roof over your head. There are lots of things to worry about. So are we being a little bit, am I being a bit unfair?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Funny enough, I was walking my dogs today and I said to my husband, I'm feeling a bit anxious because, I was following the news. And you're absolutely right. I tend to limit the amount of social media I hang out on nowadays so that I don't get myself in that dopamine crash and a bit doom scrolling.
Yes.
And I'm an adult.
Yes.
And also I limit my news, if I'm very honest as well, because if every time I sit down to eat my dinner, I'm bombarded by the the terrible news around the world. So I think it's not putting your head in the sand, but it's learning to try and control what you can control and staying focused in your own sort of more local world and family and real life, and coming off some of the devices that can escalate. And if you watched Twitter yesterday in particular, I know that's quite an awful place to hang out now, but gosh, people seem to be able to think they can say, because they're hiding behind, their handle or something. It's quite depressing. So young people, find that really overwhelming, because this is the generation of parents that didn't grow up with 24/7 connection, maybe,
That's true. Now, just on this, because I also want to ask you mentioned parents, because there's an Australian psychologist, Steve Biddulph, who talks about the language that parents use with children who are facing anxiety, who don't want to go to school, and changing the language around what he's talking about. For example, in case of a child who doesn't want to go to school, you might start by asking why they're feeling this way. What is it? Where is this feeling in your body? And trying to identify a feeling rather than condemning it. Finding the right language.
I think that's absolutely crucial. I've just written a new book all about scripts, around how to talk with and not at your kids.
Yes.
I think it's really important that language is thought about when you're doing it, rather than why. I always think kids feel a bit judged if you say, well, why don't you want to go to school, or why are you feeling depressed or anxious? That's silly, because, in my day, all that. I think if you have that kind of approach, that you are curious about trying to support them and go alongside them, not rescue them. So things like, what feels hardest about school?
Yes.
Instead of, why won't you go?
Yes.
Small steps back into school, perhaps if they're struggling to attend, focus on a gentle re-entry. I always say maybe a few lessons and a half a day, attending one supportive subject if you like it. Now, a lot of other people go, that's namby-pamby. Well, these are real issues. You've got to be very practical about them. And I think another really important aspect is sleep. We tend to not really protect our bedtimes because poor sleep is directly linked to anxiety and irritability and falling behind academically. So keep the phones at least out of the bedrooms. Keep them away from the tables when you're eating, and start reconnecting with each other, talking with your kids, not at them, and supporting them. It is hard, and we're not just protecting them and being namby-pamby. These are serious issues, as we all actually know.
Thank you very much indeed, Sue. That was Sue Atkins, parenting expert, author of the book Parenting Made Easy, How to Raise Happy Children, and host of the Navigating the Digital Jungle podcast. I thought that was quite interesting because I do think I trained as a psychotherapist for 2 years. I didn't qualify with the 450 hours or whatever you have to do to become UKCP registered, but I was fascinated by the mechanics and the questioning techniques that you learn by going through the training process itself, including some what we call neuro-linguistic programming, which is all built around auditory, kinesthetic, and these kind of elements, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So there are different ways of connecting and sharing experience and making common things between you, right? So I think some of that language actually could be quite helpful here. I mean, I'm just basing it on what Sue's just said, rather than be judgmental, which is probably the knee-jerk reaction which someone like me would have, right? Having been an RAF cadet, like, why are you doing? Why don't you just get on with it? Maybe that's not the right way when it comes to dealing with these sensitive issues. Caroline says this: it's not surprising girls are increasingly anxious. There's an epidemic of sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls. Why do girls do better in single-sex schools? Not having to put up with sexual harassment is likely the main reason. Well, there is an issue, certainly there, in terms of exposure to pornography amongst boys, and also when it comes to girls, also being exposed to revenge porn and other things, and sextortion, which is apparently rife in schools as well. So that can't be easy. And you also have a situation now where boys and girls have different views on masculinity, according to this poll. Also on feminism and gender equality. 29% of boys believe Britain would be better if we enforced traditional gender roles between men and women, whilst 31% believed it would be worse. I mean, 29% believe in traditional gender roles. There you go. Iris says this: first thing to do, which would help massively, ban all phones in school. I mean, it's an attractive thing to do. I also think it's partly probably about the way we have these conversations, and also trying to really get under the surface as to why so many young people, girls and boys, but particularly girls I'm concerned about, are so anxious. It's not just girls, but it seems to be more prevalent in girls. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973 text 845 Alan March on LBC 1046.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
It's just another manic Monday.
It's sure to be a manic Monday, as it's back to work in the House of Commons for our politicians following a stormy summer.
More than 50,000 migrants have now arrived in the UK on small boats since Labour came to power.
But some seem to have enjoyed a warmer reception.
The only way we will stop the boats is by detaining and deporting absolutely anyone that comes via that route.
So is it time for a reset to rebuff reform? Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, and the new LBC app.
This is what award-winning customer service sounds like from real Octopus Energy calls.
People are friendly on the telephone, so you stepped out, I think, for energy companies.
It was really good. People like yourself and all of your colleagues have done such a wonderful job.
Your customer service was tip-top. I couldn't fault it.
Octopus Energy. Great value and outstanding customer service. Recommended by Which? 8 years running.
With UK Export Finance, I'm fulfilling more export orders from around the world with working capital support.
export insurance means I'll get paid when exporting to challenging markets.
At UK Export Finance, we believe no viable UK export should fail for lack of finance or insurance. Between 2023 and 2024, we provided £8.8 billion of government-backed trade finance to support UK exports. Learn how we could help you win export contracts, fulfill orders, and get paid. Search UK Export Finance today.
$1.49 at McDonald's gets you a mini Oreo McFlurry. $1.49 at a big night out gets you... Sorry, no trainers. McDonald's say the menu. Actually get your money's worth. Plus a participation menu. Please apply for delivery. Subject to availability.
Julie could part exchange her car. Or check out WeBay. She could be unsure if she got a good deal part exchanging. Or cash in the bank with more bargaining power to get a bigger car for her five-a-side team. Totally played. Total player. To get a quote in 30 seconds, enter your reg number now at WeBayCar.com.
Octopus Energy. Great value and outstanding customer service. Recommended by which? 8 years running. Octopus Energy.
Ali Mirage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Ali Mirage on LBC 149. What can we do to support an anxious younger generation? 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Mark, I'll come to your call in just a second. This text is important. I'm a parent of a 15-year-old girl with serious anxiety issues who's barely been in school for 2 years. We struggled to get her GCSEs and finds life generally quite difficult. School support has been limited but sympathetic, and society is not geared towards the children of the COVID age. My daughter struggles to express why she feels like she does, but as a parent, it is both exhausting and terrifying. It feels like society is yet to wake up to a new pandemic of anxiety, with the young prompted by a perfect storm of COVID, phones, and access to global news. So just thank you very much indeed for some death. Mark, good afternoon.
When we get needs as go on.
No, I was going to say Jonathan Haidt, the anxious generation, who wrote this book about it, but carry on.
Right on. So when we get needs as people, we are sensual creatures. We like to see things. We get stimulated by things we hear, things we touch, and we're not getting our needs fulfilled in an organic way. It's not just on the smartphones. There's a lot of instant gratification going on, and with the smartphones themselves, it's
medication is, I think, welcome.
Absolutely. As ongoing, consequences, which he does, and I don't want to be on this forever.
Absolutely.
So he needs to now put this over would be wonderful, and I'm going to look that up about the trial.
Yeah, please, and discuss it with the medical professionals and see what it is. Kathy, thank you very much indeed. Sorry for your loss, and also I'm glad to hear that you're at least, obviously on the road to recovery. I hope things improve. I'm very grateful. Because that's 2 Takotsubo syndrome patients who've called just in the last 5 minutes. It's the thing, if anyone was any doubt, there you go. How have you nursed a broken heart? 03456060 973, text 84850. Caroline says emotions and physical reactions. The belief that our brain, body and emotions are all separate things is a very strange one. You're still quite right. Dan says, very difficult to do. The loss of my parents, one day at a time. Brilliant performance. Doing so. Music and laughter helps. But I'm broken hearted. My life will never be the same. But I don't have this secret. Says Dan. Thank you, Dan. This is Dan Marsh on LBC 248.
Coming up at 3 on LBC, Vanessa Phelps.
Hemi Badenoch says no more net zero. Extract every drop of North Sea oil. Is it time for Britain to drill, baby, drill?
Vanessa Phelps on LBC.
Would anyone like some Bourneville dark chocolate? Is it so dark the aftertaste lasts for a week? No.
Does it taste really complicated?
What? Is it saturated in nibs?
So dark it comes with a therapist?
To the uneducated palate, does it taste like burnt tyre?
Would scientists compare the taste to dark matter?
Is it artisanal in all caps?
Other tasting notes? Gloom.
No pretentiousness, no complexity, no bitterness. Just smooth dark chocolate from Cadbury. Cadbury Bourneville, made to be enjoyed, not endured.
Here comes Steve, with the satisfied smile of a man who's checking out at midday after a great night's sleep and a delicious unlimited brekkie. See the untamable bedhead hair, and if you look really close, you can see that properly well-rested glow, which can only mean one thing. Last night he slept at Premier Inn. Get better sleep for your money. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Breakfast subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Summer's nearly over. It's time to get back to real life. Luckily, Cinch has got the essentials sorted. And we're not talking about new textbooks. Let's see. The biggest range of cars to buy entirely online? Cinch. Free 90-day warranties? Sorted. And VAT-free Cinch servicing at a Marshall store near you? Absolutely cinched it. Everything you need and not a pencil case in sight. Cinch it for yourself today. Visit cinch.co.uk. Comparison against equivalent retailers. Visit cinch.co.uk/range code. Terms and exclusions apply.
It's Munich, 1936, and all eyes are on the capital for the upcoming Olympic Games. As athletes fight for gold and the Nazis fight for power, Detective Sebastian Wolf faces a battle of his own. In a search that will take him from high society to the city's darkest corners, Wolf is about to learn just how easily the hunter becomes the hunted. Evil in High Places is the gripping new historical thriller from the million-copy bestseller Rory Clements. Out now in hardback, ebook, and in audio.
Ali Mirage on LBC. Text 84850.
Mirage on LBC 250. This hour is effective. It's very easy to give the government a bash and sometimes talk about international affairs and all of these things, but when you're talking about affairs of the heart, and you're talking to people like Gloria, who lost a 4-year-old great-great-grandson, or Kathy, it's heart-wrenching stuff. How have you nursed a broken heart? 0345606097 text 84858. Good dad, good afternoon.
Hi, hello. Thank you for taking this call. It's actually quite interesting, really. So I'm a paramedic by trade.
Okay.
And we've been told about Takotsubo syndrome many years ago, but it was one of those things that is very, very rarely seen. But actually, a couple of years ago, I went to a young lady who recently broke up with her partner.
Yeah.
I turned up, and she didn't look very well. Turned out she was having a cardiac event, so it looked like she was having a heart attack. She then unfortunately went into cardiac arrest in front of me and her mother. We managed to work on her and managed to save her and get her back. And then we were followed up by the family. They got in contact with us and asked us to go to see them the year after for Christmas. And it turned out that they said that it was, they thought it was Takotsubo syndrome, which, you know, was obviously something I've never really come across until then. And I was actually quite surprised, because it did very much mimic a heart attack. That's exactly what she was treated for at the time.
And Luke, when you were training as a paramedic, in the training they had mentioned this syndrome to you as part of the training in passing, is that right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, it's definitely highlighted, yeah.
Okay, so you actually saw it happen. You didn't know at the time that it was this, but you later found out that it was.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a year later when we followed up, I mean, she considering, obviously she was theoretically dead for 14 minutes. We obviously done our best, but to see her a year later, absolutely fine, apparently her heart that was doing really, really well. She started doing things for the British Heart Foundation and stuff at a very young age. And yeah, really, really highlighted the fact that this is something that probably should be highlighted a bit more with, you know, the stresses and enzymes.
Tell me from your perspective, because you're on the front line of all this. Are you still working as a paramedic now?
Yeah,
okay. So why do you think it's important that we talk about it more, Luke? Because I just came across this, and I hadn't heard of Takotsubo syndrome before. But obviously you hear about people who are broken-hearted after the loss of a loved one. You think of Sinead O'Connor, you think of sometimes elderly couples that have been married, you know, for 40, 50, 60 years. One partner dies, the other one it doesn't last too long. And you think, you often think, why is this? Right? And you think a profound grief of someone, you know, losing someone very close to them. Do you think this is something that we should be speaking a bit more openly about?
I think we should, yeah. I mean, you know, especially since COVID, obviously there's a lot of stress and a lot more mental health and a lot more that's come from COVID itself. But I mean, I think that's opened up a lot of dialogue to people expressing their grief and their stress a lot more. But yeah, I mean, there are some serious side effects to stress which people don't realise. And obviously, unfortunately, we see it on a daily basis. And that, in all my years, I mean, that was definitely one that surprised me. Because unfortunately, as